I opened an email that had been sent tomorrow. A server I'd never heard of, addressed to me by name. 3 different clocks on 3 different machines, all agreed. All 3 said Wednesday. It was Tuesday.
It was a list of changes. Small ones. The kind nobody notices. A sunset 3% warmer. A new moth in the North Atlantic. The Berenstain Bears, re-merged under a deprecated naming convention. Berenstain. With an A.
I remembered an E. So do you. Patch notes. For reality. And mine came a day early. The skybox in level 7 had a 1-pixel seam, and I'd been staring at it for 11 minutes. I was nose to nose with a Trinitron CRT in a basement in suburban Chicago, my face 6 inches from a phosphor coating that had logged more screen hours than my own marriage, if I'd had one, which I had not. The seam ran diagonal across the night sky, from where the moon used to be to where the moon was after Ricky moved it. 1 pixel of pure black, leaking through the texture gap. Look behind the curtain, kid. The void waves back. It was beautiful. I'd seen worse bugs shipped to gold. I'd seen better bugs nobody ever noticed. This one was right in the Goldilocks zone. Small enough to make it into the box, big enough to bother a person like me. Vector Tangent software employed exactly 1 person like me. I filed it. Title: Level 7 Skybox, Moon Adjacent Seam, exposes near clip void. Severity, P3, cosmetic. Build 1.0.412 RC2. Repro. Spawn at L7 start. Face north-northeast. Look up 71 degrees. Move forward 4 units. Seam visible to the right of the moon mesh. Between altitude 0.81 and 0.84. Expected. Continuous skybox texture. Actual. 1 pixel seam revealing the clear color underneath. Pure black. Notes.
Likely fallout from the moon reposition commit. Subpixel jitter may make it intermittent on consumer hardware. Reproed on 3 machines, including mine, which is held together with cat hair and faith. The send button hung for 2.5 seconds before it actually committed, because the furnace was having a moment again. The furnace was the bug tracker. It lived under our producer Mira's desk on the 2nd floor, and it ran on a beige tower that was, no joke, older than the Atari Jaguar. Mira refused to upgrade it on the grounds that she could no longer remember everything that was on it and was afraid to find out. I respected that decision. The way you respect a guy who has been walking around with a knife in his back for a 1.5 years. It's a choice. It's a commitment. I wrote the ticket number, VTR 14409, in the back of my notebook. The notebook was a marble cover composition book, the kind every kid in America got issued in 3rd grade. 6 years of QA had taught me one thing I'd later wish I hadn't learned. People do not believe you about the bug until they hit the bug themselves. Then they remember the bug differently. The notebook was my receipts. I sneezed. "Bless you," said the cat. This was inconvenient on several counts. I did not own a cat. Even if I had owned a cat, the cat would have been at my apartment, not in the basement at work. And even if my cat had been at work, which it was not, the cat could not have spoken English. This was bread.
Brett Fly. Technically, on account of a 1995 incident I do not intend to unpack right now. Brett Mazek was Vector Tangent's level designer. 6'2", 320 pounds in winter weight. Mostly opinions and a sustained low-grade nicotine investment. He believed many things very firmly. The short list included: the government had been in possession of an actual extraterrestrial since the autumn of 1947. Princess Diana had been hit by something other than a car. You could get a useful portion of your daily vitamins from a Marlboro Red if you really committed. And, the one relevant to today, cats could talk if you listened with the correct part of your brain. "You're gonna get cancer," I said, without turning around. "I'm gonna get something." Yeah, no, of that I have zero doubt. "You hear Bell last night?" "Brett, I have not listened to Art Bell on purpose since the Hale Bop thing, and you know it." Cattle mutilations. Wisconsin? Cows in Wisconsin had a bad night. It's coming south, Wes. What is coming south? He took a slow, meaningful drag on a cigarette he was not legally allowed to be smoking inside the building. You'll know when you see it. I turned back to my monitor. Behind me, with the timing of a man who had been working on this bit since the X-Files pilot in 1993, Brett Fly began humming the X-Files theme. The basement at Vector Tangent had 3 QA stations, 2 engineering overflow desks, a foosball table whose right-hand bar had not turned since the Clinton administration, and a fire door that opened directly into the boiler room. The boiler hummed at B-flat. I have, for as long as I've been alive, had perfect pitch for things that did not matter. My mother used to say that. She still said it on alternating Sundays across a pot roast, with a kind of affection I did not entirely deserve. I filed 3 more bugs before lunch. The interesting one was a footstep desync. The footstep sound was playing a half beat after the foot landed. Players would not consciously notice. Their bodies would. There is a name for that feeling. There are several names. The Japanese probably have 4. The shortest English word for it is wrong. Your eyes were seeing one thing, your ears were hearing another. The spine of the book was broken. The 2 of them disagreed by a few frames about what time it was. And your animal brain, which is older than language, would know before the rest of you did. I filed it. I drank some coffee that had been hot at 7 and was now closer to broth. The boiler hummed. At 11:40, I went upstairs for lunch. Old Pete was at the break room table. Pete had been writing code since the Atari 2600. 63 years old, gray beard, gray skin, the eyes of a man who had been awake through 7 distinct shipping disasters, and was not, on the actuarial tables, going to be surprised by an 8th. He was working on a tuna sandwich and an issue of Bite from earlier in the spring. "Mariani? Pete? You see the sky thing?" I paused with my hand on the microwave handle. "The seam? Yeah. Filed it this morning." He turned a page. What? Nothing? He chewed for a while, in that deliberate way old men chew when they want you to understand they are not in any kind of hurry. "Saw one of those in 83. The Atari port of Defender. 1 pixel. Top of the screen. Whole team chased it for a month. What was it? Wasn't ours. Was in the chipset. What'd you do? He licked tuna off his thumb. Shipped it. Called it a feature. Nobody noticed.
The microwave dinged. I pulled out a lean cuisine, which had been advertised in the packaging as lasagna, but which was, in practice, a different food at every internal coordinate. One half was the temperature of the surface of the sun. The other half was the temperature of the basement. The lasagna had a desync. I sat down across from Pete. Pete, you ever feel like... Yes. You don't know what I was about to ask.
Doesn't matter.
Yes. He turned a page. Eat your sandwich, kid. It was not a sandwich. I ate it anyway.
I came back down at 12:15.
On my way back through the first floor, I passed Ricky Ho's desk. Her chair was pushed back, and her Discman was sitting on top of her keyboard, with the headphones tangled around it, paused mid-track. I could see the LCD readout through the smoked plastic. Semisonic. Closing time. I went down the stairs. Brett's chair was empty, which meant he was outside, under the loading dock awning, with the artists, doing the same thing he had been doing inside, but slightly more legally. I shook my mouse. The screen woke up. 11 new emails. Most of it was chum. A forward from my uncle, subject line, "Proof the moon landing was fake, please read." An auto-build report from the furnace, a reminder about my Y2K compliance training, which I had been auto-reminded about every Tuesday since December and was planning to keep ignoring on principle. A Jiffy Lube coupon, somehow. A milestone slip notice from Mira that I opened, scanned, and closed in under 4 seconds because there was nothing in it I did not already know in my bones. And one email from a domain I had never seen before in my life. Team pushing 2.347.11 in tonight's window. Highlights below. Full diff in the share. Hit me on slate of questions. Feature. Adjusted perceived saturation of Earthside sunsets, plus 3% warm. Per stakeholder feedback regarding nostalgia recall response. New tertiary moth species, Northeast Atlantic seaboard. Asset moth, ATL V3. Behavior parity with existing pool. Fixes. Berenstain Bears asset bundle re-merged with deprecated naming convention. Expected user impact, minimal. Sticky cache exceptions logged separately. Resolved sprite flicker on Pikachu base. Texture chord drift. Ref VRT 8821. Cornucopia element removed from the Fruit of the Loom textile branding pack. Legacy asset cleanup. Patches forward. Deprecated. Legacy NPC pool 19A. Queued for audit. Final list end of week. Owners notified. Known issues. Mandela Echo on the Bears thing. Working on it. Don't worry about it. Send love. A. I read it. I read it again. Then I started laughing. A real laugh. The kind that comes up from your stomach and surprises you in the basement air. The boiler hesitated mid-hum. Like even it had heard me and was concerned. Brett, you absolute son of a bitch. It was good. It was really, genuinely good. The voice was right, the breezy, chummy thing, the send love at the bottom, the don't worry about it, casually filed under a known issue. The way real patch notes always undersell the genuinely insane stuff and oversell the stupid cosmetic thing nobody will ever notice. The pixel-perfect detail of Moth ATL V3. Behavior parity with existing pool. He had been cooking on this for weeks. He had been waiting for the right Tuesday. I hit reply. Brad, you got me, but Moth ATL V3 is a stretch. Real QA would name it Moth ATL 03 Final V2 Use This One.tga, and you know it. Try harder. Wes. I paused, backspaced. I was not about to give him the satisfaction of a fast response. Let him stew until end of day. Maybe forward it to Ricky first. She'd lose her mind on the sunset line. I could see her face. I moved the cursor to forward. My eye drifted to the header. Wednesday, 22 April, 1998. Wednesday. I looked at the bottom corner of my monitor. Tuesday, April 21st, 1998. 12:23 p.m. Wednesday. Okay, male clients lied about dates constantly. That was just a thing. Anybody who'd been on the internet since before AOL went flat rate had seen junk dated 1985, dated 2031, dated some impossible Thursday in March 19 never. Servers were misconfigured. Time zones were a nightmare. Y2K was coming, and half the mail relays in the country could not parse a 4-digit year correctly. The discrepancy was not interesting. In principle. In principle. In practice, the offset said negative 0500. Central Time, daylight savings, correct. The time, 0914, was the kind of time an actual human being would actually send a real email, instead of midnight, or 1 second to midnight, or some other server default tell. The sending domain was a TLD I had never seen on a piece of real mail in my life. The body had specifics in it. Specifics were what amateurs got wrong. I opened the raw headers. Brett Fly, may God love him, could barely attach a file to an email. He could not forge raw headers. He did not know what raw headers were. He thought mime was a kind of French dancer. The raw view would show the originating server and a chain of timestamps, and somewhere in that chain, one server clock would be set forward a day, and the discrepancy would resolve itself, and we'd laugh about it on Thursday. The internal server had sent it at 9:13 and 58. The external mail exchanger had picked it up 2 seconds later. The vector tangent server had received it 2 seconds after that. 3 different clocks on 3 different machines all agreed. All 3 said Wednesday. It was Tuesday. I sat with that. In a basement, under a building, under a sky that I had, that morning, professionally identified as having a seam in it. The boiler hummed at B-flat. 3 desks away, Brett's last Marlboro burned down to a long, gray ghost of itself in the ashtray he was not supposed to own. Upstairs, Mira was producing a video game that was not going to ship. Old Pete was eating a sandwich. Ricky was out under the April sun, listening to a song about closing time. Somewhere on the north side of the city, my mother was teaching a room full of 4th graders the difference between its and its, and she was, on a statistically defensible basis, the best person currently alive. In front of me, on a beige CRT in a windowless room, was an email from a server I had never heard of.
addressed to me by name, that had been sent tomorrow. I read it a third time, slower. Berenstain Bears asset bundle remerged with deprecated naming convention. Berenstain. I turned very slowly in my chair until I could see the bookshelf behind Brett Fly's desk. He kept a row of paperbacks there. Mothman Prophecies, Chariots of the Gods, Communion, and, on the end, a battered children's book he kept because it had belonged to his nephew and because he found it personally hilarious to own. I had walked past that bookshelf 1,000 times in 6 years. I could have drawn the cover from memory, blindfolded, in the dark, with my offhand. The book on the end of the shelf said, "The Berenstain Bears and the Spooky Old Tree." I had been about to forward the email to Brett Fly as a joke. I did not. I minimized the email. I stood up. I sat back down. I opened my composition book to a fresh page, and I wrote in careful all caps the way I'd been writing bug titles since I was 20. Tuesday, April 21st, 98. Received email dated Wednesday. Sender, unknown domain, .dev. Content, plausible patch notes. References real-world assets. Fruit of the Loom, Pokemon. Need repro. Then, after a long, quiet moment in which the boiler hummed and I had a small, private freak-out, entirely separate from anything I was writing down, I added, in smaller letters, underneath, "Book says Berenstain. I remember Berenstain." I underlined the second one twice. The boiler hummed. Somewhere upstairs, Ricky, back from her cigarette, pressed play on her Discman. I could hear it through 2 floors of concrete, very faint, the opening chords of Closing Time drifting down through the building. To my ear, on that Tuesday, in that basement, the song sounded a little off. Like maybe this song was a half beat behind the world it was being played in. Or like maybe the world was a half beat behind the song. The two of them had not quite agreed on what time it was either. I sent an email to an address that does not exist, and it did not come back. Mail to a fake address always comes back. You send it into the dark, and a server you will never meet returns it with a little shrug. No such host. And for a moment, you feel smarter than the Postal Service. This one stayed gone. I tested software for a living. 6 years of it in the basement of a failing game studio in Arlington Heights. I found myself pouring through documents 2 more jittery coffees later. Mostly vital documents in tech. Terminal file paths, fatal integer overflows, buffer overruns. I tested software for a living. 6 years of it, in the basement of a failing game studio in Arlington Heights. All the paperwork here felt like unfinished work. Like a loose end I had to tidy up. The day before, an email had landed in my inbox from an address that should not exist, dated for a Wednesday that had not happened yet, and I had spent the afternoon trying to prove it was a hoax. I could not make it bounce. And I could not make it be nothing. The company was called Stratum, or the email said it was. I want to make clear, up front, that I was good at this. 6 years in QA had turned me into a competent research animal. I knew the difference between Yahoo and AltaVista, which was that one of them was a search engine, and the other one was a phone book in a trench coat. I knew about Dogpile, I knew about Metacrawler. I knew you could sometimes shake a real piece of information out of a college web ring if you were patient, and you did not mind walking past 300 GeoCities pages dedicated to the cast of Babylon 5. I tried all of it. I searched Stratum, 14,000 results, and none of them were a company. The first page was geology textbooks, a Christian rock band out of Sacramento, and a piece in the Smithsonian about rocks. I tried stratum.dev. AltaVista did not understand what the dot was supposed to be doing, and it returned the same hits, plus a Norwegian fishing forum. I tried Stratum Architect. I tried Architect at Stratum. I tried typing the whole address with the @ sign, which broke the syntax of 2 different engines in 2 different ways. 3 days without real sleep and running on the far side of a grief he will not name. I tried, in a moment of desperation, Mandela Echo, and got back on page 2 a small archived essay about the death of Nelson Mandela in 1991, written by a person whose Yahoo address very much wanted you to know they were a Pisces. Nelson Mandela had not died in 1991. As of April 21st, 1998, he was alive. He was the president of South Africa. He had been the president of South Africa for 4 years. The essay was wrong, in the same way the cornucopia on the Fruit of the Loom logo was right, which is the kind of sentence that did not yet make sense to me, but was about to. I closed Netscape. The next thing I did was send a test email. I wrote a message from a personal Hotmail account, the one I used for things I did not want my mother to find, and addressed it to architect@stratum.dev. I made the body 2 words. Test, ignore. I included no signature. I sent it. It did not bounce. I sat with that for a while. Mail to a fake domain bounces, eventually. Sometimes immediately, with a no such host error, and a chunk of routing information that made you briefly feel like you understood the postal service better than you did. Sometimes after a few hours, when the message had been on a milk run through 7 different servers and had given up. The bounce always came. I waited. Nothing bounced. That was a data point. I wrote the data point on a Post-it and stuck it inside the front cover of my notebook. No bounce. April 21st, 1998, 2:11 p.m. Central. Then I sent 2 more test messages. One to architect2@stratum.dev, which I made up, and one to architect@stratu.dev, which I made up by deleting a letter. I figured the bounces, when they came, would tell me whether the original domain was even pretending to be real. The 2 new ones bounced inside of 90 seconds. The original one did not. I wrote that on the Post-it too. Then I wrote, bad, not Brett. Then I tore the Post-it in half and threw it in the trash, because if Brett saw it, he would ask. And I did not yet have a story. Brett came back at 3. He swept into the basement like a low-pressure system, smelling a menthol, and dropped into his chair with the gravity of a small planet. His ashtray pile of cigarette ghosts looked extra forensic in the fluorescence. He glanced at me sideways. "You good?" "Yeah. You look like the guy in Conspiracy Theory. I have not seen Conspiracy Theory, Brett. You should see Conspiracy Theory. Okay? It's really good. Okay? He kept looking at me. There was a thing Brett Fly did, which I had not really appreciated until that afternoon, which was that under all the cigarettes and the Coast to Coast and the X-Files theme, Brett was actually paying attention to the world. He noticed things. He noticed when I had shaved badly. He noticed when Ricky was sick. He noticed that I had been quiet for 2 hours and that my screen was dark. Bug giving you trouble? Skybox thing. Filed it. Pete's seen it before. I'm chewing on it. Pete's seen everything before. He really has. Brett nodded. He waited a beat. Then he popped a fresh Marlboro out of the pack, rolled his chair back to his monitor, and started working on his level. I went back to staring at my own screen, where the email window was minimized at the bottom of the desktop in a thin little gray strip that I was not going to reopen with another person in the room. I made myself look busy. I filed 2 more cosmetic bugs I had been sitting on. I wrote a half-page memo about the footstep desync that I doubted anyone would ever read. I drank some more of the coffee. The basement hummed. The boiler hummed. The fluorescents hummed. I hummed nothing. On purpose. At 5:30, Brett packed up. You coming? Got some stuff to wrap. 20 more minutes. Don't sleep down here. I won't. You sure you're good? Brett. He raised both hands, palms out. I'm just saying. I'm good. He looked at me one more time. I could see the conspiracy lobe of his brain firing on a low frequency, the same way it fired when somebody said weather balloon in the wrong tone of voice. He did not push it. He grabbed his jacket. He went up the stairs. The fire door at the top thudded shut. I was alone in the basement with the boiler. I tried one more thing. I sat back down, opened the original email, hit reply, and wrote it short. Who is this? I read it back. It seemed insane to send. I sent it anyway. 6 years of QA had taught me that you cannot debug what you do not poke at. The mail client made its little send noise, and the message went into sent items, and the cursor blinked at me. And I sat there for 15 minutes, refreshing my inbox every 20 seconds, like a man on a first date checking his pager. Nothing came back. I copied the original email, all of it, including the raw headers, into a text file on the QA shared drive. I gave it a stupid name. coffeeorder.txt. I copied that file to a 3.5-inch floppy and dropped the floppy into my jacket pocket. I logged out. I packed up my notebook. I went up the stairs. The first floor was empty. Most people left at 5. The engineers were probably at Old Chicago or the bar across from the Best Buy on Algonquin. Ricky's desk was dark. Her chair pushed back, the same way she had pushed it before lunch. The Discman gone from the keyboard now. Mira's office light was off. I had wanted, for a moment, for it to be on, because Mira was the closest thing Vector Tangent had to a functioning adult, and I had a small, private hope that if I walked past her door looking the way I was probably looking, she would notice and ask, and I would not have to figure out how to bring it up myself. The light was off. I went out through the back to the lot. The tercel was where I had left it, under the tree that was always sticky with whatever the tree was always sticky with.
I had owned the Tercel since 1993. It was in 1989. It was gray, and it had been gray when it was new. And it was, in some philosophical sense, even grayer now. The antenna was a wire coat hanger, because the original antenna had snapped off in a car wash in 1995. The coat hanger picked up 2 stations, one of which was AM, and the other of which was a slightly different AM. The interior smelled like a cassette adapter, and a long story I had given up on. I drove home. In April, in suburban Chicago, there's a particular slant of late afternoon light that hits the strip malls on Algonquin Road. It makes them briefly beautiful. The way an ugly person can look beautiful in the right photograph and have you reconsidering whether you have been judging them unfairly your whole life. The light slanted. The Burger King looked beautiful. The Sears Tire and Battery looked beautiful. The Pier 1 looked beautiful. The Blockbuster looked beautiful. And I almost stopped out of habit. But I had nothing I wanted to rent. The cassette adapter played me half of Achtung Baby, and then ate a corner of the tape, and I had to fish it out at a red light. I lived in Arlington Heights, above a place called the Pierogi Hut. The Pierogi Hut was run by a Polish couple, whose first names I had been told 4 separate times, and which I would not, on pain of death, have correctly remembered now. They were nice people. The pierogis were extremely good. The smell of pierogi grease lived in my apartment full time, in the carpet, in the curtains, in the back of my throat, and I had stopped noticing it about a year in. New people, when they came over, noticed it within the first 8 seconds and tried very hard not to react. I had stopped having new people over. The cat was waiting on the back stairs. The cat did not have a name and was not mine. The cat was orange and large and lived in the alley and had figured out at some point that the second-floor tenant of the building above the Pierogi Hut would, if approached at a certain hour, provide tuna and quiet conversation. I had never invited him in. He had never asked. We had what I thought of as a mature understanding. "Hey, pal," I said. The cat blinked slowly. I sat on the step. He climbed up next to me, but did not touch me. He was not a touching cat. He was a sitting near cat. I put my hand out, and he sniffed it without enthusiasm. I told him about the email. I told him about Stratum. I told him about the bounces. I told him about the raw headers. I told him about Brett's bookshelf. I told him about the Berenstain Bears. The cat listened the way cats listen, which is to say he did not, but his presence had a quality of attention, which is most of what people want from listening anyway. After a while, he yawned, got up, and walked away, which is the cat version of a goodbye. And I sat on the step a while longer by myself. The sky was beginning to change. I went upstairs. The apartment was a 1-bedroom over the kitchen of the Pierogi Hut, which meant the floor was always slightly warm. I put my keys in the dish by the door. The floppy stayed in my jacket pocket. I did not take the jacket off. I sat on the couch and let my eyes unfocus on the room. I had bought the couch from a guy in Schaumburg in 1995. The couch was the color of a Doritos commercial. There was a 14-inch Magnavox on a milk crate across from it, and the Magnavox was hooked up to a Super Nintendo and a Sega Saturn that I had bought used and was very loyal to on principle, even though the Saturn had stopped getting new games. There was a bookshelf with the spines of Snow Crash and the Diamond Age and a collected Bloom County.
Deadpan livery, with quiet unease underneath. The exhaustion deepened this chapter into a flat, focused calm. A man doing precise work to keep from feeling. Conversational pace, unhurried. Let pauses breathe. When reading the text of notes, manifests, or parts lists aloud, shift to a flatter, even reading a document delivery. Then return to the narrator's voice. There was a poster for Quake on one wall, and a poster for The Crow on another wall, and the place looked, taken all together, like exactly the kind of place a 26-year-old QA tester would live in. Which was correct, because that was who lived there. The phone rang. I knew before I picked up. The phone rang in a specific way when it was my mother. It was not the phone that did this. It was me. I had a Pavlovian response built up over a lifetime, and the phone could ring identically for a telemarketer and for my mother, and I would know. Wesley? Hi, Mom.
How was your Tuesday? It was a Tuesday. She had a hum that meant she was about to ask a follow-up question and was deciding whether to be tactful. And nothing. Long day. Did you call for a particular reason?
To say hello?
You called to say hello?
I am allowed to call my only son to say hello. Wesley, you are. You also never do. That is a hurtful thing to say. You call me to confirm things. Sundays, doctor appointments, the time of family events, the weather, if you are upset about the weather. It is sunny today.
So it is not the weather.
Wesley. She paused. There was a clink in the background, which was a coffee cup, because she drank coffee at this hour, even though I had been telling her since college that it was wrecking her sleep. I had a dream about you last night. Oh boy. I dreamed you were at the front door, and I did not recognize you. That's not a great dream, Mom. No, it was not. She was being a little careful, which she did not normally do. It was the kind of dream you wake up from, and you have to go check the photograph. Did you go check the photograph? I did. And it was you. You looked the same. Glasses and everything. Mom, you saw me on Sunday. I did see you on Sunday. I know I saw you on Sunday. That is what I am telling you, Wesley. The dream did not match. She huffed at herself. I am being silly. I called to say hello. Hi. Hi. She paused again, more lightly. Are you eating? I am about to eat. Are you eating something that is food? I am about to eat something that is food. What are you about to eat? Pierogies. Of course you are. We talked for another 6 minutes about nothing. The 4th grade was reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and a boy named Marcus had asked if Aslan was supposed to be Jesus, and she had answered yes. And then Marcus's mother had called the principal. She mentioned that she might roast a chicken next Sunday instead of beef. She asked if I'd been by the Jewel and gotten the brand of cereal she'd asked me to get the week before, and I had not, and I lied and said I would by the weekend. We said goodbye. She told me she loved me, and I told her I loved her, and we both hung up. I sat on the couch with the phone in my hand and watched the room go orange. The light coming through my west-facing window at 6:48 on a clear April evening in the third week of April in suburban Chicago, in any year of my life that I had been alive, was a particular color. I knew it the way you know your mother's voice on the phone. I had grown up in that light. I had read in it. I had sat in friends' kitchens and on porches and in the parking lots of grocery stores in it. I had a body memory of it. It was almost orange, but not quite. There was a softness to it that came from the angle of the spring sun through the pollen that always hung in the Midwestern air this time of year. The light coming through my window at 6:48 on April 21st, 1998, was warmer than that. Not by much. The way a song you have known your whole life is in a slightly different key when somebody else covers it, and you cannot say what the difference is, you just know your body is annoyed. The orange was the wrong orange. The orange was an orange that somebody had nudged 3% farther toward red, and the wall the light was hitting was the wrong color, and the carpet was the wrong color, and my own hands in my own lap were the wrong color, and the cat down in the alley, who I could not see from where I was sitting, was, I would have bet, also the wrong color. I sat very still. The orange held. I got up and walked to the window and looked west, through the gap between the apartment buildings at the actual sky. The sun was low. The sky was every color it should have been at this hour. And then, layered on top, like somebody had dragged a slider in Photoshop, 3% more warmth than it should have had. It was not enough to make any other person stop their day. It was, at most, the kind of sunset a person would, if they noticed, mention to their wife at dinner. Nice one tonight, hon. I stood at the window. The boiler in this building did not hum at B flat. I did not know what it hummed at. I had never paid attention. I paid attention now. It was something around F sharp. I held that note in my head while I watched the sky. The patch had deployed. In my pocket, against my hip, I felt the floppy disk through the fabric of my jacket, and I touched it. Very lightly, the way you touch the wood of a table when you were saying out loud that nothing bad has happened to you in a while. I went and got my notebook. I sat back down on the Doritos couch. I opened the notebook to the page where, that afternoon, I had written, "Book says Berenstain. I remember Berenstain." I added, in the same careful all caps, "Dead too weak. Tuesday, April 21st, 1998, 6:49 p.m. Central. Sunset plus 3% warm. Confirmed." I underlined the word confirmed once. Then I sat in the orange light, on the couch the color of a Doritos commercial, in an apartment that smelled of pierogi grease, in a building that hummed at F sharp, with a floppy disk in my pocket, and a phone in the cradle, and a stray cat downstairs who might or might not be the wrong color. And I tried to think of a single person on earth I could call about this. The list was very short. The list was, after a while, one name long. I picked up the phone. I called a woman I had not spoken to in 3 years to tell her that reality had a bug. And she already knew. I had expected her to laugh or to hang up. Instead, she went quiet, carried the phone somewhere her supervisor could not hear, and told me she had been watching the same thing come across her desk for 6 months. I tested software for a living in the basement of a failing game studio outside Chicago. That day, An email had arrived from an address that should not exist, carrying a list of edits to reality. And by evening, one of the edits had come true in my own window. So I was not losing my mind. I had just stopped being the only one who noticed. I dialed Delphine's number from muscle memory, which is the kind of thing you do not realize you can do until you do it. 3 years since I had pressed those buttons in that order. 3 years was the kind of time long enough that I should have had to think about it, fish around in the back of my head, maybe even open the address book I kept by the phone for emergencies, and which had not been updated since 1996. I did not have to do any of that. My thumb already knew. My thumb hit the buttons before my brain caught up with what the call was going to be. There was a small, faint, stupid lurch in my stomach when the buttons made their tones. The way your stomach lurches when a song you have not heard in years comes on the radio at the right moment. It rang twice. It rang 3 times. It rang 4 times, and then her answering machine picked up. "Hi, this is Del. Leave a message." That was it. That was the whole message. 8 words. No music, no cute outgoing shtick, just her voice. Slightly clipped, slightly tired. Exactly the way she had always sounded when she answered any phone, anywhere. The beep came right after. I hung up. I sat on the Doritos couch with the cordless phone in my lap and watched the orange light on the wall get a degree less orange. My hand on the phone, my jacket still on, my floppy disk against my hip through the lining. I noticed I was holding my breath. I let it out. I was alone in the apartment, except for the smell of pierogi grease and the F-sharp building hum. And I had just heard, for the first time in 3 years, the voice of a woman I had once spent an entire summer thinking about all the time. And had, somehow, in the way that happens, simply stopped calling. That was a separate problem, which I was not going to deal with tonight. The problem in front of me was that my one-name list now had a problem. The one name on it was not home. I sat with that for about a minute. Then I dialed AOL. The number for AOL customer service in April of 1998 was, to those of us who had memorized it through repetition, the way the rest of America memorized 1-800-COLLECT, easy to dial and impossible to forget. I dialed it. I got the hold music. The hold music was the kind of music that had been written by someone who had never heard music. After 90 seconds, a human picked up. AOL customer support, this is Jeffrey. How can I help you today? Hi, Jeffrey. I'm trying to reach one of your Tier 2 operators by name. There was a pause. Jeffrey was being trained somewhere in a small room in suburban Virginia to handle the 70% of calls that involved a customer screaming about their modem and the 20% that involved a customer screaming about their credit card. Calls that came in calmly, by name, asking for a specific employee, were not in his training book. Sir, do you have a ticket number? No, Jeffrey. I am trying to reach a Tier 2 operator. Her name is Delphine Vargas. I am calling because she works there and I need to talk to her. Sir, this isn't really... You can't just call in and ask for an... Can I ask what this is in regard to? It's a personal matter. I cannot connect you to an employee based on personal matters, sir. I had expected this. I had been thinking about it during the hold music. I could feel the shape of this conversation lining itself up under me like a punchline, and I had to choose. I could bully my way through with a story about being her brother. I could tell the truth. I could come at it sideways. I came at it sideways. Jeffrey, Listen, I'm not crazy. I'm not stalking anyone. I'm not going to ask you to violate company policy. What I am going to do is escalate this to your supervisor, who is going to escalate it to her supervisor, who is going to put me on hold for 40 minutes, and at the end of all that, I'm going to be talking to Delphine Vargas anyway, because she is the Tier 2 escalation point, and your supervisor's supervisor is going to send me to her. I am offering you the opportunity to cut 12 people out of the loop. A pause. That was a really specific thing for you to know about our org chart, sir. I know. Another pause, slightly longer. Hold, please. Hold lasted about 3 minutes. The music was the same music. The room around me darkened slightly while I waited. The orange in the corner of the wall, now closer to a brick color. The kind of color where you start to think about whether to turn a lamp on. I did not turn a lamp on. I sat in the gathering dusk with the cordless phone pressed against my ear and the floppy disk against my hip. And I looked, while I was waiting, at the framed photograph on the bookshelf next to the Bloom County collection. The photograph was me and my mother, taken at my college graduation in 1994. She had a hand on my shoulder. We were both smiling. I had not looked at it in maybe a year. The hold music clicked off. This is Vargas. I had not been ready for it, even though I had been waiting for it. Her work voice was a different voice. It was lower and slower and had professional rust on it, the way a person sounds when they have been saying the same 6 sentences for 9 hours. It was also, underneath that, unmistakably her. I knew her voice the way I knew my own mother's voice. I knew it the way you know a song. Vargas, it's Mariani. There was a beat that lasted, I think, about 1.5 seconds. A long time on the phone. Mariani. Yeah. Wes Mariani. Yes. Yes. She made a noise that was either a laugh or a small noise of disbelief, or both. I am at work, Mariani. I know. I called your apartment first. You weren't there. I worked it out. You worked it out. I told Jeffrey I'd escalate. You told Jeffrey? A pause. Jeffrey is 23, Mariani. He looks 14. You have probably given him a small heart event. He sounded 14. He is 23. Another pause. Why are you calling me on a Tuesday night at work after 3 years? I did not have a good way to start. I started anyway. I got an email today that I don't know how to explain. You called me about an email? Yeah. Mariani, you are aware of what I do for a living. You handle escalations. I handle escalations from people who got an email they do not know how to explain. That is, I am giving you a number, 60% of my job. I know. Then what are you doing? Listen to me. The email was time-stamped Wednesday. I got it on Tuesday. I sent test bounces to 2 faked variants of the domain, and the bounces came back inside 90 seconds. The original domain did not bounce. Then I sent a reply to the original address, asking who it was. And then the sunset tonight? Delphine, the sunset was the wrong orange. I cannot explain that part. But it was. And the email said it would be. The line was silent for long enough that I checked the connection indicator on the cordless handset. Then she said, quietly, in a voice that was not her work voice, and was not exactly the voice I remembered either. Hold on. Where are you right now? My apartment. Are you in front of a computer? In a minute, I can be. Do not get on AOL while I'm on the phone with you. You only have one line. I have caller ID. I do not have a second line. No. Right. Okay, Mariani, hold on. I am going to do something I am not supposed to do. Hold on. There was the sound of her muffling the phone with her hand. I heard very faintly her voice saying something to someone, then someone else's voice answering, then a longer exchange. Then her hand came off the receiver. Okay, I'm on my 15 now. I have 10 minutes. Tell me again. From the top. I told her. From the top. I told her about the skybox seam. I told her about the email. I told her about Stratum and the .dev top-level domain that did not exist. I told her about the bounce tests, the floppy in my jacket pocket, the chapter and verse of the patch notes, the Berenstain on Brett's shelf, the Mandela echo line. I told her about the sunset. She listened. She listened the way she had always listened when something was actually important, which was to say, with the phone pressed to her ear and no sound from her end at all. Delphine on the phone, when she was paying full attention, was the silence between two notes in a piece of music. Brett Fly, if he had been on the call, would have made noises at every beat. My mother would have made noises. Delphine made no noises. You forgot she was there until she said something. When I was done, she said, Mariani. Yeah? Are you eating? What? Are you eating? Have you eaten today? Did you have dinner? I had a lean cuisine at lunch. Mariani. I am about to eat. You are not about to eat, Mariani. You are about to refresh your inbox for the next 4 hours. That is exactly what you are about to do. I sat in the dim apartment with the phone against my ear and did not answer that. Because she was correct. Mariani, listen to me. I have something I need to tell you, and I do not want to tell you over the phone, and I especially do not want to tell you over a phone I am holding in a room with my supervisor 20 feet away. Are you free in the morning? I have work in the morning. Are you free before work? Yeah, I can be. Heineman's Bakery on Oakton, 6:30. I am off shift at 5:45, and I will be there by 6:15 if traffic is okay. Do you remember Heineman's? I remember Heineman's, Vargas. 6:30. 6:30. And Mariani. Yeah. This is not in your head. The line was quiet for half a beat. I am telling you that for free, because I want it on the record before I have to go back to the floor. The thing you just described is not in your head. I have been seeing the version of it that comes through Tier 2 for about 6 months, and I do not know what it is, but I know that. Okay. Okay. Eat something. 6:30. Bye, Mariani. Bye, Vargas. She hung up first. I sat on the Doritos couch in the dim apartment in the now almost completely faded orange and listened to the dial tone for about 10 seconds before I clicked the handset off. The bedroom was at the back of the apartment, which meant it was over the back of the pierogi hut kitchen, which meant it was the warmest room in the building and smelled the most aggressively of frying onions all the time. year-round. I had a desk in there with my PC on it. The PC was a Gateway from 1996 with 16 megabytes of RAM, which had been state-of-the-art when I bought it. It was now starting to feel its age. The modem was a US Robotics 56K that, in practice, connected at 33.6. The monitor was a 15-inch IBM that had a slight green tint along the right edge. I turned the machine on. It made the noises a PC made in 1998 when it was turning on, which were many noises in a specific order, like a small orchestra warming up. I sat in my desk chair, in my jacket, with the floppy still in the pocket, and waited for the machine to be ready to dial. I clicked the AOL icon on the desktop. The handshake sound started. Anyone who lived through 1998 knows the handshake sounds. The squeal, the hiss, the digital fax bird, the moment of silence, and then the connection chime. They were the sound of the late 20th century making a small mistake on purpose. I listened to them now, alone in a warm bedroom that smelled like onions, with my jacket still on, and I waited for the inbox to load. You've got mail. There were 3 new messages in the inbox. One was from my uncle. Forward, all caps, something about Bill Clinton. I would deal with it never. One was a coupon from CompUSA. The third one had been sent that evening, at exactly the time I'd been on the phone with Delphine. From architect@stratum.dev to nicetry@hotmail.com. Date, Tuesday, April 21st, 1998, 7:42 p.m. Central. Subject, test, ignore. I did not open it. I sat at my desk in the warm bedroom in the dim half-dark of an April Tuesday in suburban Chicago in 1998, in a jacket I had not taken off, with a floppy in my pocket and a coffee date for 6:30 in the morning at a bakery I had not been to in 3 years. And I looked at the subject line. Test, ignore. A stranger used my name tonight. Not Wesley, the way my mother says it. Wes, the version only the people who have sat in a room with me use, picked by someone who had never been in a room with me. I test software for a living in Arlington Heights, which means I get paid to catch the small wrong thing before it ships. And lately, the wrong thing has been landing in my own Hotmail. Email from an address that does not exist, dated for a day that has not happened yet. Tonight, after I ran a quiet test I told nobody about, it wrote back, warm and sorry, and it kept calling itself us. The subject line sat on my screen for 14 minutes before I clicked it. I know it was 14 minutes because I am, by trade and temperament, a person who looks at clocks. 14 minutes of staring at 4 words in a sans serif font on a 15-inch IBM monitor with a green tint along the right edge. 14 minutes of telling myself I was about to click. 14 minutes of not clicking. In the 14 minutes, I did the following things. I got up, I sat down, I got up again. I went to the kitchen, I opened the refrigerator. There was a partial 6-pack of Berghoff and a Tupperware of cold pierogies I would statistically never eat. I closed the refrigerator. I drank water from the tap and made the face people make when they drink Arlington Heights tap water, which was the taste of every suburban Chicago tap water and was the only taste I had ever known. I went back to the bedroom. I sat back down at the desk. The subject line was still there. Test, ignore. The colon, the 2 words I had typed myself,
wrapped now in a reply from someone who had received my test message and decided to write back. I clicked it. The body of the email loaded. From architect@stratum.dev to nicetry@hotmail.com. Tuesday, April 21st, 1998, 7:42 p.m. Central. Subject, re-test. Ignore. Hi, Wes. Got both of yours. Good catch on the test variants, by the way. The bounce window on the real domain is set high specifically so that trick doesn't work, but you got there faster than most. Most people don't get there at all. Listen, I'm not supposed to write back. I know you have questions. I'm not going to be able to answer most of them tonight, or honestly probably ever. But I wanted to say, before this gets any worse, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything to deserve being on the CC line. Sometimes the wrong address gets the wrong email, and the system doesn't catch it for a while. The sunset thing was real. The Bears thing was real. Tomorrow night is going to be a lot bigger than tonight was. If you need to do anything, do not go on the record. Do not file a formal report. Do not call a newspaper. The escalation paths all loop back through us. Eat something. Sleep if you can. I'm sorry you got pulled in. A. I read it. I read it again. I read it a third time. The third time with my finger on the scroll wheel. Because there had to be a fourth paragraph. There had to be the part where the joke got revealed. There had to be the punchline at the bottom that turned the whole thing into Brett Fly grinning in the basement. There was no fourth paragraph. There was only the signature, A, in the same single capital letter as the email from yesterday. Send love, A. Tonight, I'm sorry you got pulled in, A. The smell of pierogi grease was, for the first time in maybe a year, something I could smell. I noticed I was holding my breath. I let it out. I read it a fourth time. Some things I noticed, in no particular order. He used my name. Not Wesley, the way my mother used it. Not Mariani, the way Delphine had used it on a phone 4 hours ago. Wes. The way Brett Fly used it. The way old Pete used it. The way anyone who had spent time in a room with me used it. A person who had never spent a second in a room with me had picked the version of my name that the people in rooms with me used. I would have been less unsettled if he had called me Mr. Mariani, or Wesley, or Sir. The intimacy was on its own a piece of horror. He used contractions. He started sentences with listen. He apologized. Not in the formal way, in the way a coworker apologizes when a meeting runs long and you both wanted to leave. He wrote like a person, which was, on its own, the second piece of horror. He knew what I had done at 2:10 that afternoon when I had set the bounce traps. He knew. I had not told anyone. The cat in the alley had not told anyone. And the cat had not even been there for that part of the story. He was specific about the CC line. I had been misaddressed. The email yesterday morning had been meant for someone else, and a typo somewhere in their version of an Outlook contact list had sent it to me instead. The line, "You didn't do anything to deserve being on the CC line," was an apology for a clerical error. The error was that I existed in their database as a deliverable address. I would, at some point during this chapter of my life, need to figure out how I had gotten into their database. He said the escalation paths all loop back through us. The us was the worst word in the email. The us
implied an organization. The us implied org charts, head count, payroll, performance reviews, a Christmas party. The us implied that the architect was not the boss, that there was a chain above him, that the chain was reachable through normal channels, and that the normal channels would, when used, route back to the same organization the architect was warning me not to escalate to. I stood up from the desk. I took off my jacket. I had been wearing it since 5:30 in the basement. The floppy disk shifted in the pocket as I slid the jacket off my shoulders. I draped the jacket over the back of the desk chair, very carefully, the way you set down a glass of water that has been too full for a while. The floppy stayed in the pocket. I went to the living room and got the notebook. I came back and I sat down. I opened the notebook. I wrote, Tuesday, April 21st, 1998, 8:09 p.m. Central. Architect replied, warm, personal. Used my name, Wes. Key phrase, escalation paths loop back through us. Translation, no escape via official channels. Also, warn tomorrow night, bigger. Also, apology. Sounded real. I underlined the word us. I sat for a while and stared at the underline. I drafted a reply. To architect@stratum.dev. From nicetry@hotmail.com. Subject, test, ignore. A. I have a lot of questions. I'll start with the easy ones. 1. Who are you? 2. What do you mean by us? 3. What is the system? 4. What is the CC line? 5. Why my email address? 6. What happens tomorrow night? 7. Are you a person or a program? No judgment. 8. Are you in my city? 9. Have you done this before? With anyone else? 10. If yes, how did it end? I appreciate the warning. I am not going to ignore it. I am also not going to follow it without understanding why. I am not stupid. I do this for a living. Whatever this is, I will figure out enough of it to make my own decisions. I would rather not do that adversarially. I would rather you tell me what is going on. I think you would rather that too, based on the fact that you wrote back at all. I will not call a newspaper. I will not file a formal report. That is not because you told me not to. It is because I do not know what I would say. Please write back. Wes Mariani. I read it back. It was the wrong reply. It was a QA reply. It was the kind of email I would send to a vendor when a build had broken in a way I needed them to acknowledge. It read like a defect log someone had decided to phrase in sentences. The architect had written to me like a person. I had drafted a response that sounded like a stack trace. I did not change it. I copied the whole thing into Notepad. I saved the Notepad file to my Documents folder with the most boring name I could think of, which was groceries.txt, because the part of my brain that had been awake since 7 that morning had decided that if anyone ever inspected my hard drive, a file called groceries.txt would be the last one they opened. I did not send the email. I sat with my finger on the trackball, the way a man sits with his finger on the trigger of a thing he has not yet decided to fire. Then I closed the Hotmail window. The draft did not save to drafts. Hotmail in 1998 did not really do drafts. The reply existed now only in groceries.txt, and in my head. I opened the notebook again. Draft saved to groceries.txt. Not sent. I underlined nothing. The middle of the night was a long time. I will not describe all of it. There is no narrative version of a person sitting in a bedroom at 10:30 p.m., and then 11, and then 11:30, and then 12, and then 12:30, and then 1, refreshing an email inbox and finding nothing new that does not insult the reader. I will skip ahead. A few things happened. The AOL connection dropped at 11:04. I let it stay dropped. I'd been refreshing for almost 3 hours, and I had not learned anything new. I went into the living room and sat on the Doritos couch with the lamp on and looked at the Quake poster on the wall and tried to figure out the next move. There was no next move. Heinemann's was at 6:30. Until then, I was a man in an apartment in Arlington Heights with a draft email saved as groceries.txt and a floppy in a jacket pocket 2 rooms away. And there was nothing I could do that I had not already done. I turned on the television. Late local news, an inversion table infomercial, politically incorrect with Bill Maher, and I was not in the headspace for Bill Maher. I clicked over to CNN, and there was a 5-minute segment about the Starr investigation that I watched without registering. I turned the television off. I made coffee in the PC Gamer mug I had gotten free with a subscription in 1996. I drank half of it. I made a second cup and drank none of it. I thought about calling Delphine again, and did not. I thought about calling my mother, and did not. I thought about driving to Heinemann's at 1 in the morning and waiting there for 5 hours, and did not, because it was the thing a person did in a movie, and I was not in a movie. I was in an apartment. I went back to the bedroom a little after 3 and reconnected the modem. The handshake sounds were the same handshake sounds. The connection chime came at the same place in the same order. The inbox loaded. There was one new message. It had arrived at 2:51 a.m., 20 minutes earlier, which meant it had been sitting in my inbox waiting for me to reconnect. From architect@stratum.dev to nicetry@hotmail.com. Wednesday, April 22nd, 1998, 2:51 a.m. Central. Subject: Reality version 2.347.12. Hotfix. The date was Wednesday. That was correct. The day had turned over while I was offline. The architect's mail server now agreed with my system clock on what day it was. The original wrongness, the thing that had started this whole chapter of my life, was no longer wrong. It was right. The first email had been sent from a future that no longer existed, because I had now lived through it. The new email was an email from now. That was, in some hard-to-name way, the most upsetting thing yet. I did not open it. I sat at the desk with the jacket draped over the back of the chair behind me and the floppy still in the pocket, and I looked at the subject line. Reality version 2.347.12. Hotfix. The previous version had been version 2.347.11. A hotfix was what you shipped when the last build had a bug bad enough to ship a patch for the patch. Whatever had gone out tonight had something wrong with it, and someone was fixing it now, while I was watching. I opened the notebook. Wednesday, April 22nd, 1998, 2:51 a.m. Central. Second email. Subject: Reality version 2.347.12 hotfix. Did not open. Cannot open. 2 emails in under 24 hours. The day turned over. The date is now correct. I read what I had written. I underlined the last line, which is to say I underlined the word correct, which was the most disturbing word in the notebook. I closed the notebook. The F-sharp hum in the building had, at some point in the last several hours, shifted very slightly, maybe a quarter step up. I did not know whether this was real or whether I had simply been listening to it for so long that my ear had drifted. I held the new note in my head and got up from the desk. I left the apartment at 5:40. I put the jacket back on. The floppy was where I had left it. I checked it twice, which is something I would not normally have done, because checking a thing you already know is the kind of behavior you watch other people do and feel slightly bad for. I put the keys in my hand. I locked the door. I went down the back stairs. The cat was not on the stairs. The cat was not anywhere I could see. I did not look for him. The tercel started on the second try, which was its way. I drove to Heinemann's. Arlington Heights at 5:50 a.m. in April was the kind of empty that the rest of the country never sees. Suburban America, before the strip mall lights come on. The kind of empty where you can drive 4 miles down a 6-lane road without seeing another car, and past 3 gas stations, and a White Castle, and a closed AutoZone, and a Walgreens with the cashier asleep against the window. The sky in the east was the lightest possible blue. The Tercell's coat hanger antenna picked up an AM news broadcast about the Mark McGwire home run race, which I let play because it was, in some way, a sound an ordinary world made, and I needed an ordinary sound. Heinemann's was on Oakton, half a mile west of where Oakton crossed the Forest Preserve. The parking lot was a small one. There were 4 cars in it when I pulled in, none of which was Delphine's. I knew her car. She had owned the same Civic since college. Either she had bought a new one in the last 3 years, or she had not arrived yet. I parked at the far edge of the lot, facing the door, with a clean view of any new car that pulled in. It was 6:16. The bakery windows were warm yellow against the blue early morning sky. I could see through the glass an older woman behind the counter pulling a sheet pan of something out of the oven. The bell over the door rang faintly when a man in a delivery uniform came out with a tray. I shut off the engine. I sat in the tercel with the heat off, in a jacket with a floppy disk in the pocket, and a notebook on the passenger seat, and no sleep behind me. And I watched the bakery door, and I waited for her to come. Somebody had been emailing me patch notes for Reality, and I had a second one sitting unopened on my hard drive because I did not want to be alone when I read it. So at 6:30 that morning, I drove to a bakery in Niles to not be alone. The woman I was meeting was Delphine Vargas, who took the Tier 2 calls nobody else would escalate, and who I had not seen in 3 years. She had 63 reasons to think I was not the only one this was happening to, and she had brought all of them. I sat in the Tercel for 6 minutes before Delphine's Civic pulled in. It was the same Civic, same green, same dent in the rear quarter panel, where, in 1995, she'd backed it into a fire hydrant at 3 in the morning at a gas station off Interstate 57 on the drive back from Champaign. I had been in the passenger seat. The dent was the kind of thing you forget you remember until you see it.
She pulled into the spot 2 over from mine. She did not look at the Tercel. She got out, she locked the Civic, she walked to the bakery door.
She paused at the door for 1 second, and in that second she looked at her watch, the way a person looks at a watch when they are going into a meeting they did not want to take. She went inside. I got out of the Tercel. I locked it. I locked it twice, because I had checked the floppy twice that morning. And I was apparently the kind of person now. I put the notebook under my arm. The cold spring air smelled like exhaust and faintly like bread. The bakery door had a bell over it that rang when I came in. Heinemann's was, as I remembered, Heinemann's, with one exception. The exception was that everything was smaller than it had been 3 years ago. The case at the counter was smaller. The booths were smaller. The pictures of pastries on the wall, painted by someone in 1979 and never updated, were smaller. The older woman behind the counter, who I had met dozens of times across the years of my life, and whose name I had never learned, was also smaller. She nodded at me, the nod of a woman who recognized my face, but had not been informed I was coming back into her bakery this morning, and was filing the question. Delphine was in the booth in the back corner, the same booth, with her back to the wall. I went to her. She looked up. Mariani. Vargas. You look like hell. Yeah. Sit down. I sat down. I knew what she was looking at, because I had seen it in the bathroom mirror at 5:30 that morning. The button-down shirt I had put on Tuesday at 7 a.m., slept in twice over, which was now Wednesday's shirt by the Enverse property. The same khakis, the same jacket I had owned since 1993, the same New Balance sneakers, glasses with a smudge I had been seeing through for about 4 hours. A person who would not pass an inspection by anyone who cared. She had moved past us. I could see it in the way she looked at me. She had filed it and processed it and put it where it went. 3 years was, for her, 3 years, not the equivalent of last week, the way it was for me. She had dark hair, shorter than I remembered, cut to about her jawline. She was wearing a dark gray cardigan over a black tank top, dark slacks, the kind of sensible shoes a person buys when they have to stand on a call center floor for 9 hours. She had switched to contacts at some point in the last 3 years. She had the kind of tired that came from a 9-hour shift under fluorescent lights, which is a different kind of tired than the kind I was wearing. "Hi," she said. "Hi. This is weird." "Yeah. Let's not do it. The catching up thing. Not now. Okay? Maybe never. Okay?" She nodded once. The nod was a small mercy. It was also a small door closing. I noticed the door close and decided to feel it later. "Coffee," she said, and got up and went to the counter. She brought back 2 coffees in heavy ceramic mugs in a paper bag. "I ordered you a kolache," she said. "You are not going to argue with me about it." "I was not going to argue with you about it." "Yes, you were." She set the bag in front of me. The bag was warm. Inside the bag was a kolache filled with apricot, which had been my order. The order I had always had. The order she had not asked me about and had not had to ask me about. I opened the bag and took out the kolache and started eating it without saying anything else, because the alternative was saying something I was not going to be able to take back. "Mariani." "Yeah?" What do you have? I told her. I told her the same way I had told her on the phone, which was in order, which was the way I told a story when I wanted to make sure I did not lose a piece. The skybox seam, the email Tuesday morning, the bounce tests at 2:10 p.m., the Berenstain on Brett's shelf, the sunset Tuesday evening. I told her about the architect's reply. I had read it enough times now that I could recite it. I recited it. She listened the way she always listened, which was not to listen, which was to stop existing while another person was talking. When I got to the line about the escalation paths looping back through us, she sat back in the booth and did not lean forward again for the rest of the recitation. When I finished, I told her about the draft. "You wrote a reply," she said. "Yes." "Did you send it?" "No." "Where is it?" "On my hard drive, saved as groceries.txt. She made a noise that was almost a laugh. "What did it say?" I told her, in summary. The numbered list of questions, the argument, the closing line. "Please write back." "Don't send it," she said. "I wasn't gonna send it." "You were thinking about it." "Yes." "Don't." Okay. I told her about the hotfix email, the 2:51 a.m. arrival, the Wednesday timestamp that was now correct, the fact that I had not opened it. "You have not opened it?" "No." "Why?" "Because I did not want to be alone when I opened it." She nodded. She nodded the same way she had on the phone, the small once nod that meant she had heard me and was filing it. She tapped a fingernail twice on the Formica. "Okay, now me." She pulled a manila folder out of the bag she had brought in with her. I had not noticed the bag, which is to say, I had noticed it the way you notice a bag a person is carrying, which is to say I had not noticed it at all. It was a black canvas messenger bag, the kind a person who took it seriously to work bought from a catalog in 1996 and was still using. The folder was thick. She set it between us, on the Formica, next to the Kalaki bag. She did not open it yet. "I've been logging Tier 2 tickets I think are connected since November," she said. 63 of them. There are more. Those are just the ones I printed." "How many more?" "I don't know. I stopped counting in February." "Why?" "Because the answer was getting in the way of doing my job." She opened the folder. Inside the folder were 3/4 of an inch of printouts. The printouts had been organized with handwritten tabs in different colors. I could see the topmost tab, timestamp. The next, domain. The next, content. The next, account ghosts. The next, geography. I leaned in. She pushed 2 printouts across the Formica to me. Ticket number 98111172847. Date opened November 17th, 1997, 2:23 p.m. Eastern. Customer, Harwell, Elaine J. Location, Austin, Texas. Tier 1 operator, P. Nguyen. Tier 2 escalation, D. Vargas. Issue: Customer reports receiving email from her late husband on November 16th, 1997, dated September 4th, 1997. Customer's husband died August 28th, 1997. Email is from his AOL account, which customer reports she closed September 1st, 1997. Customer requests we explain how this is possible. Customer is not distressed, but is asking us to investigate. Customer is, per her words, a retired computer programmer. Tier 1 notes suggested possible delay in mail server queue or third-party spoofing. Customer rejected both. Customer provided email headers, which appear authentic. Tier 2 notes. Vargas. Reviewed headers. Headers appear to originate from internal AOL routing. No record of the account being active after September 1st, 1997. No record of the account ever sending the message in question. Customer's account log confirms message received November 16, 1997, with no anomaly. Recommend further investigation. Status: closed November 19th. Brian K. Reason. User error. Ticket number 980203, 91118. Date opened February 3rd, 1998, 9:11 a.m. Eastern. Customer: Lau, Kevin. Location: Palo Alto, California. Tier 1 operator: J. Porter. Tier 2 escalation: D. Vargas. Issue: customer reports receiving email forwarded from his sister, referencing a film they both saw in 1996 called The Coriolis Effect, starring Tom Cruise. Customer believes this film does not exist. Sister insists it does, and she has watched it on VHS recently. Customer wants AOL to verify whether the email is real and whether he is having a stroke, in that order. Tier 1 notes. Confirmed email is real and was sent by sister. Could not verify film. No record of any film by that title released in 1996. Suggested customer contacts sister directly for clarification. Tier 2 notes. Vargas. Customer's sister confirms purchasing VHS at Blockbuster 3 weeks ago. Customer drove to Blockbuster. No record of title in inventory. Sister unable to locate VHS in her home. Sister now also distressed. Recommend further investigation. Status: closed February 6th. Brian K. Reason: not AOL issue. I read them. I read them twice. I did not know what to say. I sat at the Formica table with a half-eaten apricot kolache in my left hand and 2 pieces of paper in my right, looking at the names of strangers in cities I'd never been to. Elaine Harwell of Austin, Texas. Kevin Lau of Palo Alto, California. People who had called AOL because something had gone wrong in their lives that they did not have a vocabulary for. Who had been sent to Delphine because she was the escalation point for things Tier 1 could not explain. Who had been logged by Delphine in a folder she now kept in her car because the folder would get her fired if Brian found it. 63 of them, I said. At least. All like this? In one way or another. Different states? Different states. Different income brackets. Different age groups. Different ethnicities. Different account ages. Different time zones. Different volumes of usage. What's the common factor? There isn't one. That is the point. I put the printouts down. Wes? Yeah? There are more of you out there. Okay, she said. What do we do? That is a question I have spent the entire night not answering. Yeah, me too. For longer. I drank some coffee. It was bakery coffee, which is to say it was hot and good in the way nothing else in the world is. Option 1, I said. We go public. Newspaper, internet forum, something. No. Hear me out. I have heard you out, Wes. I have heard myself out. For 6 months. I have walked to the phone 3 times to call the Tribune and walked back. Why? Because the architect is not making it up. The escalation paths loop back. I have escalated 63 tickets, and they have closed 63 tickets, and not one of those closures was visible to me. I do not know who closed them. I know Brian signed them off, but Brian does what he is told. Brian was told. By whom, Wes? By whom? Okay. Option 2? We stop. No! Hear me out, she said. I have heard you out. We are not stopping. I know. So, option 3. Option 3, she said. We sat with option 3 for a minute. Option 3 was investigation. Option 3 was what the two of us, sitting across from each other at 6:50 in the morning in a bakery, had been doing all along, and would keep doing, separately and now together. Option 3 was the slowest option, and the option that, of the 3, contained the highest probability of one of us being wrong in a way that mattered. Option 3 was also the only option. Conditions, I said. Yeah. You first. Don't send the draft. I told you I wasn't going to. I am putting it in conditions. You do not send the draft, not without telling me first. If you change your mind, you tell me first. Okay. Open the hotfix email today. Not at work, at home, tonight. Tell me what's in it tomorrow. Okay. My turn, I said. You pull the full ticket archive, not on AOL's machines. Print every one you have on paper at home if you have to. I am ahead of you on that. I have been printing 4 a night since November. The folder is the ones with patterns. The rest are at my apartment. Okay, then this. We do not meet at Heinemann's again. Not for a while. Why? Because we used to come here. If anyone is looking, this is the first place they would look. Mariani, no one is looking. You don't know that. You don't know anyone is. I know there are 63 of me out there. I know they have all been closed as user error. I know somebody made those closure decisions. I don't know who that somebody is. Until I know, we don't meet at our bakery. She looked at me. Okay, she said. Fair. And one more thing. What? We find one of them, one of the 63, the most local one. We approach carefully. We listen. She thought about it. There's one in Schaumburg, she said. I will look him up tonight. Okay? Okay. She nodded, the small nod. We sat there for a few seconds without saying anything else. The bell over the door rang, and a man in coveralls came in for coffee. The older woman behind the counter said something to him I did not understand. He said something back in the same language. The bakery hummed at, I noticed, a low B, which was its own kind of completeness, the way an old building knew its key. Mariani. Yeah. How is Karen? She's good. She had a dream Monday night. Yeah. She dreamed I came to the door and she did not recognize me. Delphine looked at me for a long second. Wes. Yeah. Open the hotfix email tonight. Okay. And eat the rest of that kolache. I ate the rest of the kalaki. We left the bakery together at 7:04. The older woman behind the counter said something to me on the way out, which was a thing she had never done before. I did not know what it meant. Delphine did. She said back to her, in the same language, something I did not understand. The woman nodded. What did she say? She said I look like my mother. What did you say? I said she always does. We walked across the parking lot. The morning had become morning while we were inside. The sky was full daylight now. The kind of blue that meant it was past 7 and the world was open for business. Cars had appeared in the lot during our hour. The Tercel was at the far end. The Civic was 2 spots over. We stopped between the cars. 48 hours, she said. 48 hours. Not here. Not here. You have my home number? From memory. Of course you do. Call me from a payphone if it matters. A payphone? Yes, Mariani, a payphone. We are not on AOL for anything that matters until we know more. Okay. She got in her Civic. She started it. The engine made the noise a 1990 Civic makes, which was a noise that had not changed in 3 years. And then I knew the way I knew her voice. She backed out of the spot. She raised her hand off the steering wheel to me, a small, flat goodbye, and she drove out of the lot. I watched her pull out onto Oakton and turn east toward the city. I sat in the Tercel for another minute after she was gone, just to make sure she was gone. Then I opened the notebook. Wednesday, April 22nd, 1998, 7:08 a.m. Central. Met D. Vargas at Heineman's. 63 tickets, at least. There are more of me. Decided, option 3. Conditions apply. Next, open the hotfix tonight. Find Schaumburg. Not this bakery again. I started the engine. 63 people had noticed something was wrong. 63 tickets had been closed by somebody none of them could name. Marked user error. Filed where nobody would look again. I had filed a ticket too. Tuesday morning. A seam in the sky that should not have been there. Logged in the one system at work that kept a record of everything that happened to it. I had not once thought to check what they had done with mine. I drove to work. The bug I had filed on Tuesday was closed overnight, signed off by an engineer who was not in our system, and as far as I could tell, did not exist. I had tested games at Vector Tangent for 6 years. I knew every person who could close a ticket in our tracker. There were 9 of them, and none of them was named Kressler. That was not the part that made me sit still. The part that made me sit still was when he had done it. I got to Vector Tangent at 7:38 in the morning, which is approximately a 16-hour reset of my normal schedule, and was, statistically, the earliest I had been at work since I had pulled an all-nighter in November 1996, trying to find a save corruption bug that turned out to be in the publisher's QA script and not in our code. The parking lot was empty except for one car. The car belonged to Mira, because of course it did. Mira had been at the office at 7:38 every weekday for as long as I had worked there, and she had been there at 5 for at least half of them. I parked the Tercel. I sat in it for a minute before getting out, because the Tercel was warm, and the morning was not. I got out. The fire door at the back was propped open with a brick that was named by a previous engineering team the door brick. There's a part of QA that wants to file a bug on the door brick every time I see it, because the door brick is a non-compliant fire safety solution. But I have not yet had the energy to argue with a brick. I went down the stairs.
The basement at 7:40 in the morning sounds different than the basement at any other time. The boiler hums at the same B flat, but the fluorescents are at half power because the timer has not kicked them on yet. And the row of CRTs along the QA wall are all asleep, which is the only state in which a row of CRTs has dignity. My desk was where I had left it Tuesday at 5:30. The nice try mug was where I had left it Tuesday at 4:55. The coffee in it had finished evaporating during the night and had left on the bottom of the mug a brown disk of pure caffeine sediment that I respected intellectually and would not be drinking, no matter what. I sat down. I took off the jacket. The floppy was in the pocket. I checked it twice, which I have already noted I am the kind of person who does now. I draped the jacket over the back of the chair. I put the bag with the notebook in it under the desk. I shook the mouse. The Trinitron came on, with the small sound a Trinitron makes when it remembers it has a job. I had 11 new emails. Most of them were chum. One was a build completion notification from the furnace. One was a memo from Mira about milestone scope, which I closed without rating because I was not, on this day, capable of having a feeling about milestone scope. I opened the furnace. The furnace, that morning, was running, which is to say it was loaded, which is to say it had not crashed overnight. This was a minor miracle, and I noted the miracle and moved on, because the miracle was not the reason I was here. I typed VTR 14409 into the lookup field. The ticket loaded. Ticket VTR 14409. Title: Level 7 skybox, moon adjacent seam, exposes near clip void. Severity: P3, cosmetic. Build: 1.0.412, release candidate 2. Filed by W. Mariani. Filed Tuesday, April 21st, 1998, 9:47 a.m. Central. Status: closed. Resolution: working as intended. Resolution note: asset behavior per spec. No action required. Signed off by D. Kressler. Resolved Wednesday, April 22nd, 1998, 3:14 a.m. Central. I read it. I read it again. Working as intended is a specific QA resolution code. It means the engineer who looked at the bug determined that the behavior was not actually a bug, that the system was doing what the design said it was supposed to do, and that QA had filed a misunderstanding. It is the resolution code that exists to tell QA they were wrong. The 1-pixel seam in the level 7 skybox, exposing pure black void through a texture gap caused by an unplanned moon reposition, was not working as intended. It was working as a bug. I had filed it correctly. There was no reading of Crusader Vector's design spec in which a pixel of pure black leaking through the night sky was a feature.
But that, on its own, was not the part that made me sit very still. The part that made me sit very still was the timestamp. Wednesday, April 22nd, 1998, 3:14 a.m. Central. I looked at the timestamp for a while. I opened my notebook. I flipped to the page where, the previous night, I had written,
Wednesday, April 22nd, 1998, 2:51 a.m. Central. Second email. Subject, Reality version 2.347.12. Hotfix. Did not open. Cannot open. 2 emails in under 24 hours. The day turned over. The date is now correct. 23 minutes. The Hotfix email had arrived at 2:51 a.m. in my Hotmail inbox. The bug closure had happened at 3:14 a.m. in Vector Tangent's internal QA system. 23 minutes apart. Both in the dead of night. Both signed by names I did not know. Both labeled in their respective bureaucracies in language that meant nothing was wrong. I checked the signed off by field one more time. D. Kressler. I did not know a D. Kressler at Vector Tangent. I had been here 6 years. I knew everyone with sign-off privileges in the furnace. There were 9 of them. None were named Kressler. I opened the user directory of the furnace. There was no D. Kressler. I checked the sign-off log directly, not through the user lookup. The sign-off log had a record of D. Kressler signing off VTR 14409 at 3:14 a.m. Wednesday. The record existed. The user did not. I sat with that. Brett arrived at 8:15. He came down the stairs the way Brett comes downstairs, which is to say like a man delivering bad news he is excited about. He was humming the X-Files theme. He stopped humming when he reached the bottom and took one look at me. And he said, "What the fuck?" "Good morning, Brett." "You came in early." "I have been told." "You never come in early. This is the first day of a new me." "Wes? Brett? You look like you slept in your car." "I did not sleep in my car." You did not sleep. Less. He came over to his desk, dropped his bag, and started excavating a Marlboro Red from a pack he was not supposed to have. He did not light it. He did not need to. The act of locating the Marlboro was its own ceremony. "What's going on, Wes?" "Nothing." "Nothing." "Yeah." He looked at me. The conspiracy lobe of his brain was firing. I could see it firing. He was firing in the way it fired when someone on Coast to Coast started talking about underground bases in New Mexico. It was the look of a man whose internal antenna had picked up a signal. "Nothing," he said again. "Brett?" "Okay." He sat down at his monitor. He turned it on. He did not look at me again for 40 minutes. Brett Fly, when he is being given the silent treatment, does not give it back. He just goes quiet. The quiet is its own message. The message is, I have noticed, and I am storing it, and we are going to come back to this. I worked on the build. At 9:30, I went upstairs. I told myself I was going to the break room to get coffee. The actual reason was that I wanted to check whether D. Kressler was a real person who happened to not be in the bug tracker. I walked the first floor.
Ricky was at her desk, headphones on, head down on a sketch of some kind for level 12. I waved. She looked up and smiled at me, the small, distracted smile of a person mid-thought. "You look like garbage, Mariani." "Top of the morning to you too, ho." "I mean it warmly." "I know." She went back to her sketch. The Discman was on top of her keyboard. The same Discman. A different CD. I did not look at which one.
I walked past the engineering bullpen. I scanned the desks. No nameplate, no nameplate, no nameplate. We did not really do nameplates. I looked at the seat assignments taped to the wall by the door, which was the thing Mira maintained because no one else would. The list had every employee on it. There was no Kressler on the list. I went to Mira's office. Mira's office had a window. The window faced east. At 9:30 in April, it was full of light. Mira was at her desk with her glasses on and her hair pulled back, which was the configuration Mira used when she was looking at financials. She did not, on most days, like to be looked at while looking at financials. "Mariani?" "Mira, you look like hell." "I have been told." "Sit down." I sat down. She took her glasses off and folded them in her hand the way she did when a conversation was about to be a conversation and not a passing thing. "Are you okay?" "I am okay." "Wesley." "I am okay, Mira." She looked at me. Mira looked at me for a long time. The way a person looks at a tire to figure out which side has the slow leak. I held the look. I had no choice. I was tired enough that I could not have looked away if I had wanted to, which I did. "Crusader," she said. "Yeah." "How was the build?" "I am on it. The build is the build. I have notes." "File them by lunch." "Yes." "And Wes?" "Yeah." "If you need a day, take one." "I do not need a day." "You may need one tomorrow." "Okay." She put her glasses back on, which was the dismissal. I got up. "Mira." "Yeah?" "Do we have an engineer named Kressler?" She looked at me over the glasses. "No," she said. "Why?" The name came up in the furnace. Bug sign-off. I don't recognize it.
She thought about it for 2 seconds. Could be a contractor. Could be a publisher rep. The publisher's QA team has, I think, 8 or 9 people. I do not know all of them by name. Send me the ticket number. I'll ask. VTR 14409. She wrote it on a post-it. Anything else? No. Get some food in you, Mariani. The third woman in 30 hours. Karen on the phone Tuesday. Delphine at 6:30 that morning. Now Mira. I did not know what to do with the pattern, except note it. "Yes," I said. I went to the break room. Pete was at the break room table. He was working on a tuna sandwich. The tuna sandwich appeared to be the same tuna sandwich as the one from yesterday, which is to say, it was a tuna sandwich. Pete had been eating the same lunch for 6 years. He had varieties of lunch, which were like the varieties of weather, which is to say, technically distinguishable, but not, in any meaningful sense, different. "Mariani." "Pete, you look bad. I have been told 3 times this morning." "It is well said." I poured a coffee. The coffee was the coffee that lives in the break room pot, which is to say it was hot and the color of regret. I sat down across from Pete.
We sat for a minute. Pete? The Defender thing. The one in 83. You told me about it. I did. You said it shipped. It did. He chewed for a while. I have wondered, sometimes, he said, what would have happened if we had tried to find out where it came from. I sat with that. You didn't try. I did not. Why? He looked at me. He took the lid off his pickle jar, which was the thing he carried in a small Tupperware, and he picked out a pickle, and he chewed it for what seemed like a very long time.
I do not know if there is an answer to that, Mariani. You did not try. I did not try. Did the rest of your team? No. No one. No one. He put the pickle jar lid back on. He folded the wax paper from his sandwich into a small, careful square. He stood up. Pete? Yeah? Did anyone ever, after, look into it? He looked at me for what I would, in retrospect, count as one of the longer looks I had ever received from another human being. Not that I know of, he said. Eat something, Mariani. He left. I went back down to the basement at 10:20. Brett was working on his level. The screen showed a corridor he had been iterating on for 3 weeks, with a lighting pass that I would never, for the rest of my life, fully understand. He did not look up. I sat down. I worked on the build for 2 hours. I filed 6 bugs. None of them were the skybox. None of them were closed by D. Kressler. The morning passed. At 12:30, Brett rolled his chair 4 feet across the floor, the way he did when he was about to talk to me without quite turning to face me. And he said, "You want to tell me?" "Tell you what?" "Whatever you want to tell me." I looked at him. He was not looking at me. He was looking at his screen. He had a Marlboro behind his ear that had been there since 8:15. His hands were on the keyboard, but he was not typing. He was just sitting there, looking at his own screen. And he was offering me a thing that, with Brett, was a real thing to offer. He was offering me the version of himself that did not broadcast. I thought about it. I thought about the bookshelf behind his desk, with the Mothman prophecies and the chariots of the gods and the communion and the book on the end that, when I had looked at it that morning at 8:45 when Brett had gone to the bathroom, it still said Berenstain. I thought about Brett Fly on Coast to Coast in a parallel universe where he had been a guest, telling Art Bell about the email and the sunset and the bug closure. And I thought about who would be listening to that broadcast, and whether D. Kressler was the kind of name a person who listened to that broadcast would write down. I thought about Delphine on the phone last night saying, "We are not on AOL for anything that matters until we know more." I opened my mouth. I held it open for a second too long, the way a person does when the sentence they were about to say turns out to be the wrong sentence. Brett did not turn around. "Yeah," he said, quietly, to a screen. "Okay." He rolled his chair back to his desk. He put his hands back on his keyboard. He started typing. I sat there with my mouth open. Then I closed my mouth. And I went back to work. At 1:15, Brett went outside to smoke. He did not invite me.
which he had, every workday for 6 years, invited me. He did not look at me when he passed my desk. The boiler hummed at B-flat. I left vector tangent at 5:30. The drive home was the drive home. I did not turn on the radio. The Tercel made the Tercel sounds. The light through the windshield was, for what it was worth, the normal kind of light. The unadjusted kind. Although I was not, at this point, the kind of person who could tell the difference reliably. I pulled up to the pierogi hut at 6:02.
The cat was on the back stairs. He had been waiting, I think, although the cat does not have a face for waiting. He looked at me. I looked at him. I did not have anything to say tonight that I had not already said last night, so I did not say it. I went up the stairs. I unlocked the door. I went inside. I put the keys in the dish. I put the jacket on the back of the kitchen chair. I took the floppy out of the jacket pocket and put it on the counter. I took the notebook out of my bag and put it next to the floppy. I stood in the kitchen for a minute. The PC was in the bedroom. The hotfix email was on the PC. I had told Delphine I would open it tonight. I was going to open it tonight. I was, at this exact moment, fully committed to the act of opening it tonight, in the way a person fully commits to running a marathon some other day. I took a shower. I changed into clean clothes. They were the same kind of clothes, button-down and jeans, but they were not the clothes I had been wearing for 40 hours, and the difference was not nothing. I made a sandwich. I ate the sandwich. I drank a glass of water. I drank a second glass of water. I went to the bedroom. The PC was off. I turned it on. It made the noises a PC makes in 1998 when it is turning on. I sat in the desk chair. The screen came up. I dialed. The handshake sounds were the same handshake sounds. You've got mail. I sat in front of the screen, and I looked at the inbox, where the hotfix email had been waiting since 2:51 a.m. Wednesday, where it had sat through the entirety of my Wednesday, where it had sat through the bug closure, and the conversation with Pete, and the moment with Brett Fly that I had broken something with, and where it was now waiting for me to do the thing I had told a woman in a green Civic at 7:04 that morning that I would do. I reached for the mouse.
The email had been waiting in my inbox since 2:51 that morning. And when I finally opened it, somewhere near the bottom, in a warm and reasonable voice, it asked me to call my mother and tell her I loved her. It framed that as a courtesy. It said there was something coming after the patch that night that it could not stop, and that I would want, on the far side of it, to have already done it. I had read a lot of changelogs in 6 years. None of the others had told me to call my mother. I clicked. The email opened. From architect@stratum.dev. Subject: Reality version 2.347.12. Hotfix. Wes. Tonight's patch is the big one. 2 things you should know before it deploys at 11 p.m. Central. 1. The thing you found in your bug tracker this morning, that name you didn't recognize, that closure timestamp, you were right to notice it. I'm not going to explain it. You already understand the shape of it. The shape is the answer. 2. Don't drive to Schaumburg tomorrow. I know the address on the Vargas list. I know you and she agreed to find the one closest to you. I would prefer you didn't. But more importantly, I would prefer she didn't go either. I am going to ask you to do something that will not make sense for a while. Please call your mother. She'll be fine. This is not a threat. I am not in the business of threats. I am asking because of a thing that happens after the patch tonight that I cannot stop, and that you will want, on the other side of it, to have done. 2 minutes is enough. Tell her you love her. Eat something. A. I read it. I read it again. I read it a third time. There was a part of me that had, on the drive home from Vector Tangent, been preparing a small QA-style triage list for whatever was in the hotfix, categorized by severity, identified dependencies, prioritized response. The list was now obsolete. The email was warm. The email was specific. The email mentioned my mother. The email mentioned Schaumburg. The email knew about a conversation that had happened at 6:50 in the morning in a booth in a bakery in Niles. There had been 4 people at Heinemann's that morning who could have heard us. The older woman behind the counter, the man in the dark blue mechanic's coveralls who came in for coffee, possibly one of the delivery drivers, possibly none of them. The booth was at the back. The bakery was small. The conversation had not been at full volume. The email knew the agreement Delphine and I had made about finding the Schaumburg ticket closest to me. The email did not name the address, just that we had agreed to find it. I sat with that. I want to be clear that what I felt in that exact moment was not fear. Fear arrived later. What I felt was something colder, a kind of professional admiration for the specificity of the surveillance, mixed with a slow displacement of the world I had been living in for 26 years. The architect knew about Schaumburg. The architect knew about my mother. The architect had asked me to do a small, kind thing for her, framed as a courtesy. The shape of the email was hospitality. The hospitality of a person who was about to do something to me that I did not yet understand. I closed the email. I closed AOL. I left the PC on because it was warm and it was, at that moment, the only friend I had in the room. I walked through the living room, picked up the cordless phone from where it had been in its cradle since the Tuesday call with my mother, and sat down at the kitchen table. I dialed Delphine. I dialed her home number, not AOL. It was 6:43 p.m. Wednesday, and she would be at home before her Wednesday night shift, which started at 8. Tier 2 evening shift was 8 to 4. She would be eating dinner, or showering, or asleep. The phone rang 4 times. Her machine picked up. "Hi, this is Del. Leave a message." The same 7 words. The same flat, tired voice. The beep came. I had been thinking, on the 3rd read of the email, about what I would say to her if she did not answer. I had been composing the voicemail in my head while I read. I had a version that explained everything. I had a version that explained nothing. I went with the second. "Vargas, it's Mariani. Hotfix is open. Schaumburg is off. I'll explain Thursday. Stay home tonight if you can. Bye." I hung up. It was the right voicemail. It was also a voicemail that, if I were on the receiving end of it after a 9-hour shift, would have me sitting up in bed at 3 in the morning trying to figure out which of 43 possible things Schaumburg is off meant. I would have to explain it Thursday. I sat with the handset on the kitchen table for a few seconds. Then I picked it up again and dialed my mother. She picked up on the second ring.
Wesley,
Hi, Mom.
you called me
Yes.
on a Wednesday.
Yes.
You have not called me on a Wednesday in, let me think, ever.
It's possible I have.
Wesley, are you dying? I am not dying, Mom. Wesley, I am not dying, Mom.
She let the line sit for a second. I could hear in the background the sound of ER's opening theme on her television. She watched ER every Thursday night, which meant she was watching a Wednesday night syndication rerun, which was a thing that had only recently become available to her on the Fox affiliate, and which had, every Wednesday since February, generated a follow-up conversation on Sunday about whether George Clooney's character was, in her opinion, going to leave the show, a development she had been predicting for 2 years, and which had not yet occurred. "What is going on?" she said. "Nothing is going on. I wanted to say hi." "You wanted to say hi?" "I wanted to say hi. Wesley, I have known you for 26 years. 26 and a half. 26 and a half. In all of that time, you have called me to say hi on the following occasions: your high school graduation, your college graduation, the day you got the vector tangent job, the day the dog died. Although that was me calling you. I am subtracting that one. So 3 occasions. Mom. 3 occasions, Wesley. I just wanted to say hi. Wesley. I sat with the phone. I had not, when I picked it up, been prepared for her to read me this accurately. I had been prepared for her to be touched and confused and to let me off the hook. I had not been prepared for her to be Karen. Mom. Yeah? Tell me about your day. She let the line sit again. I could hear her thinking. I could hear her, with whatever instrument a mother uses to assess these things, deciding that whatever was wrong with me was not the kind of wrong that could be fixed by pushing, and that the kindest thing she could do was honor the framing. I had a regular day, she said. I will tell you about it. She told me about it. 4th grade had been finishing The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Marcus, the boy who had asked if Aslan was Jesus, had not been in school. His mother had called the school again, this time about the depiction of Father Christmas as a real entity in the narrative, which she felt was contradictory to the Aslan as Jesus reading and was confusing the children. Karen had a meeting with the principal in the morning. I made small noises at the right places. The noises were the small noises a person makes to say, I am listening, please continue. They were the only noises I was capable of making. When she ran out of school, she said, "Oh, and I was cleaning out the bottom drawer of the sideboard this morning, and I found that photograph of you at 5, your 5th birthday, the one with the cake your aunt made that looked like a UFO. Do you remember that cake?" "I remember the cake, Mom." "You were so small, Wesley. I have been thinking about how small you were." "Yeah. I will bring it on Sunday and we can look at it." "Okay. Are you eating?" "I just ate." "What did you eat?" "A sandwich." "What kind of sandwich?" "Ham and cheese." "On what?" "Mom." "On what?" Wheat. Good. She paused. Wesley? I put the handset down on the kitchen table. The architect had been right that 2 minutes was enough. The call had taken 7. It had been the right call. It was the kind of call I should have been making to her at least once a month for the entirety of my adult life. I had not been. I would not start now. I would start, instead, after this all resolved, in some future version of my life I could not, at the moment, picture. It was 7:15. The patch was at 2300 hours. I had 3 hours and 45 minutes to wait. I want to describe in some honest way what the next 3 hours and 45 minutes felt like. But the truth is, they did not feel like anything. They were a flat plane of time that I crossed by performing a series of small actions that did not individually or together accomplish anything. I drank water. I sat on the Doritos couch. I went into the kitchen and looked at the floppy on the counter and the notebook beside it and did not pick either of them up. I went back into the living room. I turned on the TV. The local news was on. The lead story was the Starr investigation. The Starr investigation had been the lead story for 3 months. There was a man in a tie talking about something Linda Tripp had said. I turned the TV off. I went into the bedroom. The PC was still on. The screensaver was up, a slow geometric pattern that had come with Windows 95 and that I had never replaced because replacing it would have required caring about the screensaver. I sat in the desk chair without doing anything for what may have been 10 minutes or 30. At 10:30, I went into the kitchen and picked up the floppy from the counter. I looked at it, without turning it over in my hand. It was a floppy. It was a 3.5-inch black plastic floppy disk with a metal sliding cover and a paper sticker that said, in my own handwriting, coffee order. It was, in objective terms, an unremarkable object. I put it back on the counter. At 10:40, I went into the bedroom and stood at the west-facing window. 20 minutes until 11 p.m. Central. I do not know, in retrospect, why I went to the window. The architect's email had not said where to look or what to look for. The email had said the patch was big. The email had not said the patch would be visible. I went to the window because the sunset on Tuesday had been visible, because the 3% warm had been the first thing I had been able to confirm with my own eyes, because, in the absence of any other proof that the architect was real, I had developed, over the previous 28 hours, a small superstition about windows. I stood at the window. I looked west, through the gap between the apartment buildings, at the same sky I had looked at on Tuesday. The sky was dark now. April in Chicago, 10:40 p.m. The sky was dark. There were lights on the horizon from Algonquin Road and from the strip malls along it. There were a few stars visible above the lights. There was a faint glow at the very horizon line that was probably O'Hare. I looked at the sky. I looked at the clock on the bedside. 10:58. I looked at the sky. 10:59. I looked at the sky. 11 p.m. Central. For a fraction of a second, the gap between the apartment buildings showed a sky that was not the sky over Arlington Heights. I cannot tell you what the other sky looked like, because the fraction of a second was too short for my eyes to process and my brain to record. I can tell you, in the way you can tell about a dream you had 30 seconds ago that is already evaporating, that the other sky was a color my eyes had never been calibrated to see, that the stars were in a different configuration, and that something in the middle of the gap, very far away, was bright in a way that no star in the actual sky over Arlington Heights had ever been. The fraction of a second ended. The sky returned. O'Hare. Algonquin. Stars. Pollen. I held my breath. The sky stayed. I stood at the window for a long time. The boiler in the building hummed at what was probably F-sharp. I could no longer isolate the note. The note may have shifted. I was no longer the kind of witness to small wrongnesses I could trust about small wrongnesses. I turned from the window. The bedroom was the bedroom. The PC was on. The screensaver was the same slow geometric pattern. The clock on the bedside read 11:00 and 23 seconds central. I went into the kitchen. The kitchen at midnight on a Wednesday in April 1998 had a clock on the microwave that read 12:00 in green digital numerals. The clock had been blinking 12:00 for 3 years because I had never set it after the power outage in 1995 that had reset it. The clock did not know what time it was. The clock had been doing its job for 3 years under that constraint and had not complained about it. I sat at the kitchen table. I opened the notebook to a new page. I wrote in the same careful all caps I had been writing in for 2 days now. Wednesday, April 22nd, 1998. 11 p.m. Central. Patch deployed. Something happened at the window. Fraction of a second. Cannot describe. Sky wrong. Stars wrong. 2 minutes in? Not sure I saw it. 30 minutes in? More sure. Architect email. Schaumburg off. Call mom. Eat. Called mom. Called Vargas, no answer, voicemail. Did not eat. I read what I had written. I underlined sky wrong. I drank a glass of water that I did not remember pouring. The phone rang. It was 12:04 a.m. I had been in the kitchen for approximately 4 minutes. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I picked it up on the 4th. Hello? There was nothing on the other end. I waited. There was the kind of silence on the line that is not silence exactly. That is the texture of a line that is open. There was a faint hum that may have been the line itself and may have been the hum of the room I was in. Hello, I said again. The hum continued for what was probably 3 seconds and may have been 5. Then there was a click. The dial tone came on. I held the phone to my ear and listened to the dial tone for a few seconds. I checked the caller ID. The display read, unavailable. I put the phone down on the kitchen table. I sat at the table with the notebook open in front of me, and the floppy on the counter to my left, and the jacket on the back of the chair beside me, and the cat downstairs in the alley, and my mother on the north side of the city, probably asleep by now, and a woman 2 suburbs east just starting her shift. And I tried to count the number of separate threads that were currently active in my life. I lost count at 6. The boiler in the building hummed at a note that I could no longer reliably identify. The boiler in the building hummed at a note that I could no longer reliably identify.
The phone rang at 12:04 in the morning, and there was no one on it. I had the handset against my ear before I chose to pick it up. 6 years of answering alarms does that to a person. The alarm sounds, and you answer. What broke is a question for later. What came back this time was not silence. It was the sound of a room. And I was not standing in it. A stranger had been emailing me from an address that should not exist. One letter signed at the bottom. My notebook lay open on the kitchen table. 2 words underlined twice in my own hand. Sky wrong. And in the dark, over a shut pierogi place in Arlington Heights, holding a line with nothing on it, the only thought I could finish was that someone had wanted to know whether I was home. 3 seconds of it. Then a click, clean, the kind a finger makes on a hook switch. And the dial tone came up underneath like water filling a sink. The caller ID read unavailable. I would like to tell you I did something smart, that I dialed *69 after, that I had a tape recorder running, that I thought like the QA tester I am and captured the repro steps while the bug was live. I did not. I stood over the shut pierogi place and held a dead line against my ear for longer than made any sense. And then I put the handset down on the table next to the notebook. I did not put it back in the cradle. I am not sure why. Maybe because the cradle was in the living room. And the living room was dark. And I did not want to walk into it. I did not sleep, which by then was less a decision than a weather condition. At some point, the radiator in the wall started up, and I lay on top of my blankets in the olive jacket I had not taken off and listened to my building hum. My building hums at F sharp. It has hummed at F sharp since I moved in. The boiler and the old pipes and whatever lives behind the bathroom tile. All of it agreeing on one note, the way a tuning fork agrees with itself. I have a perfect ear for things that do not matter. I cannot tell you the capital of most countries, but I can tell you the microwave at vector tangent beeps in C. And the elevator in the publisher's building dings a minor third above it. The building was not humming at F sharp. I lay there, and I tried to make it be F sharp. I hummed F sharp at it under my breath to give it something to match. It would not match. It was close. It was close the way a photograph of your mother is close to your mother. The note had moved, or my ear had moved, or the thing that decides what F sharp is had moved, and I could not tell which. Lying in the dark, trying to tune a building I do not own, I understood that this was the actual problem. Not the email, not the sky. The reference was gone. I had spent my whole life checking things against a note I assumed was nailed down, and someone had walked into the room and quietly turned the peg. I got up at 5:50. There was no point pretending. I called Delphine at 6:15 because she gets off the overnight Tier 2 shift at 6, and I knew she would be in her car. She answered on the second ring. Mariani. Vargas. You sound like a man who has not slept. I called you last night, I said. I left a message. The hotfix one. I got it. A pause, and under it the sound of her Civic, the particular rattle the dash makes at idle that she has been meaning to fix since 1994. I've listened to it twice. You talked for 90 seconds and said almost nothing, which for you is a lot of nothing. Tell me what was in the email. The actual words. So I told her. I have the architect's emails close to memorized at this point, which is its own small horror. The way you memorize a song you hate because the radio will not stop playing it. I recited the hotfix. I told her about the shape is the answer. I told her it had warned me off Schaumburg. I told her it had asked me to call my mother. 2 minutes is enough. And that I had called, and the call had lasted 7. I told her it had told me to eat. I told her about the sky. That part came out badly. I am good at small wrongnesses. The sky was not small. I kept reaching for the size of it, coming back with nothing, with a color my eyes were not calibrated for, which is the best I had, and which sounded insane out loud in a way it had not sounded in the notebook. She let me finish. The Civic rattled. "Read me the timestamp," she said. "What?" "The hotfix. You said it came in at 2:51 in the morning. You're sure?" "AOL dropped me at 11:04. I reconnected at 2:30. The mail was waiting. 2:51, Wednesday." Wednesday. She did not say anything. The Civic rattled, and then it stopped rattling, which meant she had put it in park, which meant she was sitting in a lot somewhere, not driving. And Delphine does not stop driving for nothing. "Mariani," she said. What did the email reference? Walk me through the text again. Not the tone, the events. What things did it mention that had already happened? I went through it. The D. Kressler closure, which I had found in the furnace at 7:38 that morning. The Heinemann's meeting, which was 6:30. The thing about my mother and me, you and she agreed, which referred to a conversation I had not had with my mother until that night. "Stop," she said. "The Heinemann's meeting, 6:30, Wednesday morning. The Kressler closure, you found it at your desk after 8. Right. And the email came in at 2:51. Right. In the morning. Wednesday morning. And I heard it. I heard it the way you hear a word you have said 1,000 times suddenly come apart into sounds. I had read that email 3 times sitting at my kitchen table, and I had not heard it once. It knew about the meeting, I said slowly. Before the meeting. It knew about all of it before any of it, Delphine said. The email is older than the things it's describing. It came in at 2:51, and it talks about a bug closure from after 8 and a conversation from that night like they already happened, like it's writing you a report. Her voice had gone very flat, very even. The voice she uses when a Tier 2 ticket has stopped being annoying and started being a problem. Mariani, you read this thing 3 times. I was tired. You're always tired. You have perfect pitch for a microwave. You caught a 3% shift in a sunset. And you read an email out of order in time 3 times and didn't notice. I know. That scares me more than the email, she said. And she did not soften it. And I loved her a little for not softening it. We met at the Denny's on Gulf Road in Schaumburg at 7:30, because it was open and because it was not Heinemann's. We had a rule about Heinemann's. We made it ourselves, at Heinemann's, which is the kind of thing you only notice the irony of later. No more meeting at the bakery, because the architect had known about the bakery, and the whole point of option 3 was to investigate quietly, to be two people who were harder to watch than one person sitting in a tercel outside a window. Denny's was not quiet. Denny's at 7:30 on a Thursday is the loudest room in the suburbs, all clattering plates and a griddle and a table of contractors arguing about the bowls. But loud is its own kind of cover. You cannot single out a whisper in a room that is already shouting. She was in the back corner booth when I got there, facing the door, her back to the wall. She had the manila folder on the table in front of her, and her hands flat on top of it. And she did not get up, and she did not smile. And she said, "Sit where you can see the door." And I sat across from her, where I could see the door. I want to describe her honestly, because I was looking at her honestly for the first time since the bakery, when I had been too busy not catching up to actually see her. Charcoal cardigan over a black tank top, the cardigan she has owned since I knew her, the ribbing worn smooth at the cuffs where she pushes the sleeves up, hair to the jaw, the clean line of it. 9 hours of overnight shift under her eyes, and the eyes still sharp, still moving, still doing the thing where they take inventory of a room. She had a coffee in front of her she had not touched. There was a kolache on a plate next to the folder, apricot, untouched also. And I understood she had ordered it from me before I arrived, and I did not say anything about it, and neither did she. "Before you open that," I said, nodding at the folder, "tell me why we're at a Denny's in Schaumburg specifically. The architect told me to stay out of Schaumburg." "I know it did." She turned the coffee cup a quarter turn by the handle, lined the handle up parallel to the table edge, did not drink. "That's why we're here. It told you to stay out. So either it's protecting you from something here, or it doesn't want you to find something here. I'd like to know which." She looked at me. "Also, nothing's open in Niles at 7:30, and I needed to sit down with you and the folder where I could lay it all out flat. Mostly the second thing. Don't make it dramatic. That is Delphine. She will tell you she has walked into the lion's mouth on purpose, and then tell you it was about table space." She opened the folder. I had seen it at the bakery, but I had not really seen it. At the bakery, she had shown me the shape of the thing. 63 tickets, color-coded tabs, a system. Now, she laid it open and turned it so it faced me, and I saw the system from the inside. Blue tabs along the top edge for timestamp, yellow for domain, green for content. A run of red ones she called account ghosts, orange at the bottom for geography. Every tab was a close ticket, the customer call she had taken at Tier 2, escalated, and watched her supervisor Brian close as user error. 63 of them. 6 months. "You think the email is the strange thing," she said. "The email out of order in time. I want to show you something." She pulled 3 tickets from under the blue tabs and laid them in a row, turned so I could read them, and put one finger on the first. "Elaine Harwell, Austin. I told you about her at the bakery. Her husband died in November. In February, she starts getting email from his account. Not spam, not someone who broke in. His account, his writing. Answering things she'd said to him out loud in the house." Brian closed it as a compromised password. She moved her finger. "Marcus Reyes, San Diego. Calls in March because his bank statement shows a payment confirmation for a concert.
The confirmation is dated the 4th. He's calling on the 2nd. The statement is showing him a payment he hasn't made yet for tickets to a show he hasn't bought. Her finger moved again. Sumi Okafor. Newark. Voicemail on her machine from her sister. Time-stamped tomorrow. She plays it for me over the phone. Her sister is telling her about a conversation the two of them are going to have at dinner. The dinner is the next night. The sister doesn't remember leaving the message. The message knows how the dinner goes.
She squared the 3 tickets up, edges aligned, and sat back.
3 tickets, she said, out of 63. And those are only the ones in the blue tabs, the ones I filed under timestamp. There are more. Mariani, your email isn't strange. Your email is the most normal thing in this folder. It came in before the things it described, and so did a payment confirmation in San Diego, and a voicemail in Newark, and an answer from a dead man in Austin. It's not a glitch in your inbox. It's the same glitch. It's everywhere. I've been holding 63 pieces of it for 6 months and calling it user error because that's the box Brian gave me to put it in. The contractors at the other table got loud about something. Someone dropped a fork. The griddle hissed when the cook laid down a fresh row of bacon, and the smell of it came across the room. And I sat there looking at 3 tickets from 3 cities squared up on a Denny's table and felt the floor of the thing drop another level. It's writing reports, I said. What? On the phone, you said the email reads like a report, like it already happened and someone wrote it up after? I put my own finger on the Harwell ticket next to hers. That's what these are. Not predictions. A prediction is a guess. These aren't guesses. They're too specific. They get the dinner conversation right. They're records. Someone is keeping records of things that haven't happened yet. And the records are leaking backward into the week before, into a voicemail, into a bank statement, into my inbox at 2:51 in the morning. I looked up at her. The Mandela stuff Brett goes on about, the Berenstain thing, the cornucopia, those are old records leaking through, things that already got changed. This is the same leak, but it's running the other direction. We're not seeing edits to the past. We're seeing the changelog for a week that hasn't shipped yet. Delphine was very still. She does that. Where I get loud and start narrating, she goes still, the way a cat goes still, the way the room on the phone last night had gone still. If you're right, she said carefully, then the architect didn't predict your Wednesday. No. It read it after and mailed you the notes before. Yeah. Then it's already been to the end of the week, she said. It's standing somewhere up ahead of us, and it's looking back, and it's bored enough, or careful enough, or kind enough to send one of us a copy. She finally picked up the coffee. Her hand was steady. I noticed because I was watching for it not to be. And it was. And that was somehow worse. Eat the kalaki, Mariani. You look like garbage, and we're gonna need you upright. I ate the kolache. It was good. Heinemann's is better, but Denny's apricot filling at 7:30 in the morning, when you have not slept, and the floor of the world has just dropped a level, is its own specific kind of good. And I ate the whole thing. And Delphine watched me do it, with the flat, watchful patience of a woman confirming a system is still operational. There's a thing I haven't told you, she said, when the plate was empty. There's a lot of things you haven't told me. You've been logging this for 6 months. This one's from this morning. She did not move to the folder. She left her hands around the coffee cup. When I parked to take your call, I was in the lot at the call center. I'd just clocked out. I had the engine running. And the radio came on. The radio was off?
The radio was off, Mariani. I turn it off when I park because the battery in that car is older than our relationship. She turned the cup. It came on by itself for about a second, in between stations, just static. And then it went off again.
And I sat there, and I told myself it was the wiring, because the wiring in that car is held together with the same optimism as everything else. She looked at me. And then you called and told me about a phone ringing in your kitchen with a room on the other end and no one in it. And I drove here thinking about the fact that I didn't tell you about the radio and you didn't make me.
You just told me yours. The contractors had gone. The booth they had left was being wiped down by a kid in an apron who was not listening to us, who had no reason to listen to us, who lived in a Thursday that was going to ship on schedule, like every Thursday he had ever had.
It started watching you, I said. It started watching me, she agreed. Or it always was, and I'm only now logging it under the right tab. She closed the folder. She squared its edges against the table, the way she had squared the 3 tickets, the way she squares everything. And she put both hands flat on top of it again. And for the first time since the bakery, she let me see that she was afraid. Just for a second. Just a flicker at the corner of the mouth that does not smile easily. I had 63 tickets and none of them were mine, she said. That was the deal I had with this thing, without knowing I had a deal. I watched it happen to other people, and I filed it. I was the one taking the calls. She looked down at her own hands on the folder. I think I just got moved into the folder, Mariani. I think this morning I stopped being the person who takes the call.
Outside the Denny's window, the Schaumburg morning was doing an ordinary thing. Gray, going to white. Traffic on Gulf Road. A guy scraping frost off a windshield 2 cars down from her Civic. The architect had told me to stay out of Schaumburg. We were eating breakfast in the middle of it. And somewhere up ahead, at the end of a week that had not shipped yet, something had already watched us do it, and written it down, and decided which one of us got the notes. She picked up her keys.
Don't go home the usual way, she said. And put your phone back on the hook. Leaving it off the cradle doesn't stop anything. It just means the next time it rings, she'll be standing closer to it. I had not told her I left the phone off the cradle. I opened my mouth to ask how she knew. She was already sliding out of the booth, the folder under her arm. Because it's what I did too. Last night. After the radio. Off the hook. Same as you. We're the same animal, Mariani. That's the whole problem.
She went out through the loud, bright room into the lot, and I watched her cross to the green Civic with the dent in the rear quarter panel. And I sat a while with the empty plate, listening to a room full of people who were going to be fine.
My mother called me on the car phone, and I do not own a car phone. The Terso has an AM radio, a coat hanger antenna, and a cassette deck that ate my last good tape in 1995. There is no phone in it. There has never been a phone in it. It rang anyway. The double pulse of a 1998 telephone. Out of the dash speaker. And when I reached out and touched the radio to find out if it was hot, my mother's voice came through it. Clear and close. Out of a car that had no way to carry it. I tested other people's software for a living, and I was good at it.
which is the only reason I noticed any of this. Now I was driving north on Roselle Road toward a suburb that something had warned me to stay out of. My oldest friend in the passenger seat, and a folder of 63 impossible things on the dash. And the voice coming out of a car with no phone had gotten one small detail of my whole life wrong. On purpose. And it was not finished. Delphine called me at 6:40 that evening and said, "I found the Schaumburg ticket. We're going tonight." She did not say hello. She did not ask if I had slept, which I had, 4 hours, face down on the Doritos couch with the lamp still on. She said, "We're going tonight," the way you say a thing you have already decided and are now informing the other person about as a courtesy. "The architect told me to stay out of Schaumburg," I said. "I know. I was there when you told me. I'm the one who took us to a Denny's in the middle of it to make a point." A pause, and the rattle of her dash. She was driving. Delphine does her thinking in motion, always has. The whole time we were together at U of I, she worked out her hardest problem sets behind the wheel of that Civic, on Route 45 with no radio. "Mariani? It told you to stay out. It didn't tell me anything. It's been very careful about that. It writes to you. It watches me. It has never once told me where not to go." Another pause. "I'd like to know why I'm allowed to go where you're not." I stood in my kitchen with the phone I had, in fact, put back on the hook. The notebook was on the table where I had left it at midnight. "Sky wrong," underlined twice. "Mom found the photograph," underlined once. Since Tuesday, I had been the one who noticed things, the one who pulled the thread, the one who drove toward the wrongness. And standing there in my kitchen, with 4 hours of sleep and a phone in my hand, I noticed that I did not want to go to Schaumburg. I want to be precise about this, because it matters later. It was not fear, exactly. Fear I had already met. This was something underneath fear. The thing that makes a man check a floppy disk twice when he knows it is there. It was the sense that I had been told to stay out by something that had read the end of the week, and that staying out was possibly the one piece of advice in all of this that the architect had given me for my own sake. "I think we shouldn't," I said. The dash rattle stopped. She had pulled over. "Say that again?" Delphine said. We had it out in the parking lot of a Jewel Osco on Algonquin Road, because she was already driving to my place, and I met her halfway, which is a thing you do when you have known someone long enough that the geography arranges itself. She had the Civic nosed in against the cart corral. I got out of the Tercel and got into her passenger seat, and the folder was on the dash, and there was a single floppy clipped to the visor with a binder clip. And I understood that she had spent the day pulling the archive to disk, the way they had agreed to at the bakery, while I had spent the day asleep on a couch. The inside of the Civic smelled like the inside of the Civic always had. Old coffee and the pine thing that had stopped being pine sometime around 1996 and was now just a shape that hung from the mirror. "You first," she said. "Tell me why we shouldn't. And don't tell me it's because the email said so. You don't take orders from your own bug tracker. Tell me the real one." So I tried. I told her the architect had read the whole week. We had decided that, at the Denny's, that it stood somewhere up ahead and looked back. And if it stood up ahead and looked back, then when it told me to stay out of Schaumburg, it wasn't guessing. It was remembering. It had already seen what happened when I went to Schaumburg, in some version of the week, and it had not liked it enough to break its own rule and warn me. "That's the part," I said. "It broke its rule. It told me not to escalate, not to call a newspaper. Fine, that protects them. But staying out of one suburb doesn't protect them."
There's no org chart reason to tell me that. It told me that the way you tell someone, don't take Route 53 tonight. It told me that like a person who did not want me to get hurt. Delphine was quiet. She had her hands at 10 and 2 on a parked car, which is a Delphine thing, holding the wheel of a car that is going nowhere. Okay, she said finally. Now hear mine. She took the floppy off the visor. 63 tickets. I pulled all of them today, and I sorted them the way I should have sorted them 6 months ago. Not by what kind of weird, but by where. Geography. The orange tabs. She turned in the seat to face me. Mariani, they're not evenly spread. Austin, San Diego, Newark, Palo Alto. Those are ones and twos. 1 ticket, 2 tickets, scattered. You know how many are inside 30 miles of where we're sitting right now? I did not. 19, she said. 19 of 63. A third of everything I've logged in 6 months happened in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. And I never saw it because I was filing by symptom, not by map. She tapped the folder. And the single densest spot on that map, the one address that shows up on 3 separate tickets under 3 separate customer names, is a self-storage place off Roselle Road in Schaumburg. The Jewel Osco sign buzzed. Someone wheeled a cart across the lot, and the wheel had the wobble that every 4th cart has. It told you to stay out of Schaumburg, Delphine said. And Schaumburg is where the thing is densest. You think that's it protecting you? I think that's it protecting the thing. She put the floppy back on the visor. One of us is right, and the only way to find out which is to go look at a storage unit. I'm going either way. I would rather go with you. But I have been the person who files other people's emergencies into a folder for 6 months, and I am done being that person. And I am not going to sit in Schaumburg eating a kalaki and call it investigating. That landed where she meant it to land. The drive is where I called my mother, or where my mother called me. I've gone back and forth on which of those is the true sentence, and I have not landed on one. We took the Tercel because the Tercel's coat hanger antenna pulls in AM better than the Civic's real one, and Delphine wanted the news on low while we drove, the way some people want to witness. We took Roselle Road north with the windows up against an April night that had not decided whether it was still winter. The McGuire and Sosa thing was on the radio. 2 men hitting baseballs very far in a season that had not gotten strange yet. And it played under everything, like a thing the ordinary world was saying to itself. My mother called the car phone. I do not have a car phone. I want to be clear about that. The Tercel has an AM radio with a coat hanger for an antenna and a cassette deck that ate my only good tape in 1995 and never gave it back. There is no phone in the Tercel. There has never been a phone in the Tercel. It rang anyway. Not the radio. A phone. The specific double pulse ring of a 1998 telephone. Coming from the dash. From the speaker. From somewhere in the car that was not a place a ring could come from. Delphine looked at the dash. She looked at me. She did not say anything, because there was nothing to say that would not be stupid. And Delphine does not say stupid things. She just goes still. I reached out and I touched the radio, the way you touch a thing to find out if it is hot. And the ringing stopped. And my mother's voice came out of the AM speaker of a 1989 Toyota Tercel. Clear, close, the way she sounds on a good phone line. And she said, "Wesley, you're driving. I can always tell when you're driving. You do that thing where you say hi like it's a question." I had not said hi. I had not said anything. The radio had been playing baseball 4 seconds ago. "Hi?" I said. "There it is," my mother said.
warm, pleased with herself, and Delphine's hand had found the door handle. Not to open it, just to be holding something. I won't keep you. I know you hate the phone in the car. I just wanted to make sure you're still coming Sunday. I found the most wonderful thing for you. You at your 5th birthday, with the cake, the one with the spaceship on it. You won't remember it. I want you to have it before I forget where I put it again. The cake with the spaceship on it. There had been no spaceship. The cake at my 5th birthday, in every version of that day I had ever held in my head, had been a sheet cake from the Jewel, with a number 5 candle and nothing on it. No spaceship, no UFO, no nothing. A plain white cake, with my name spelled wrong in blue gel, because the kid behind the counter had heard Wesley and written Westley. I had held that detail my whole life, the wrong name in blue, and there was no room in it for a spaceship. You okay, Wesley? You went quiet. I'm here, Mom. You sound thin, Wesley. Which is a thing my mother says. You sound thin, as though thinness were a quality that traveled down a phone line, and which she had said to me 1,000 times in 1,000 ordinary phone calls that came out of telephones. And I gripped the wheel of the Tercel at 10 and 2 like Delphine in a parked car. And I said it was fine, and I would see her Sunday, and I loved her. And the line went to baseball. Just like that. Mid-word. McGuire was up. The crowd was the crowd. The ordinary world said its ordinary thing to itself, and Delphine let go of the door handle, and neither of us said anything for a mile. Your mother, Delphine said carefully, called the car on a radio. Yeah, and told you about a photograph, the spaceship one, the one you told me about at the bakery, the 5th birthday. She had the folder open on her knee now, in the dark, by the light of the dash. Mariani, when did she find it? In the real version? Before tonight? When did she tell you about the photograph? Wednesday, I said, on the phone. After the hotfix, the architect told me to call her. 2 minutes is enough. And I called her, and she told me she found the photograph. And tonight she called you to tell you about it again, Delphine said. Except this time the cake has a spaceship on it, and you've got a 20-year-old memory of a plain white sheet cake with your name spelled wrong. She closed the folder. It's not just leaking backward anymore. It's editing the leak. The photograph is getting more detailed every time it shows up. Like someone's still working on it. I turned off Roselle onto the frontage road, and the storage place was ahead of us. A long, low row of orange doors behind a chain-link fence, lit by the kind of sodium light that makes everything the color of an old photograph. And I slowed down. And I did not turn in. We sat in the Tercel outside the fence, with the engine running and the baseball low, and we looked at Unit 114, which was the unit 3 different tickets, under 3 different names, had all, somehow, been about. It was just a door. That is the thing I keep coming back to. An orange roll-up door with a number on it and a hasp and no lock, which was the first wrong thing, because a storage unit with no lock is a storage unit with nothing in it, or everything in it, and there is no cheap way to find out which. The place was the kind of place that exists in every suburb, and that no one has ever seen a person enter. A long row of identical doors, a chain-link fence with a gate that took a code, a little kiosk by the entrance, dark, with a hand-lettered sign about office hours that had faded to the color of weak tea. There was one car in the whole lot, parked down at the far end by the dumpster. A tan sedan with a film of pollen on it thick enough to say it had not moved in a week. No people. No sound, except the Tercel idling and the sodium lights doing the faint electrical hum that sodium lights do. A hum I could not stop myself from pricing out, somewhere between A sharp and B, just above the boiler's note, flat and dirty. A
the sound of a place that runs all night for no one. "No lock," Delphine said. No lock. 3 tickets. She read them off in the dashlight, flat, the way she reads things when she wants the facts to do the scaring for her. A woman in Hoffman Estates who got a phone call from inside her own house while she was standing outside it. A guy in Schaumburg whose answering machine recorded a message that had not been left yet. A kid in Elk Grove whose pager went off with a number that turned out to be this address in 1998, when this storage place, according to the county, was built in 1991. But this unit, Unit 114, does not appear on the 1991 plan, or the 1994 plan, or the 1997 plan. Unit 114 is not on any plan, Mariani. The units go 112, 113, 115. There's no 114 on the map. There's a 114 on the building. I looked at the door. 114. Stenciled. Sodium orange. As real as any other door. We sat with that for a while. Delphine did not reach for the door handle, and I did not take my foot off the brake. And the thing we were both not saying was that one of us was going to have to decide whether we got out of the car. That is the whole story of investigating something, in the end. You drive to the place, you sit in the car, and then there is a moment where the investigating stops being something you talk about and starts being something you do with your hands, where you open a door and put your feet on the ground of a place you were warned away from. And the gap between those two things is wider than anyone tells you. I had crossed it before. I crossed it every time I opened the architect's email. But there is a difference between opening a thing on a screen 2 rooms from your bed and opening a thing that is sitting under sodium light behind a fence at 9 at night. And I sat there, feeling the width of that difference. And I did not move. And while I was looking at it, the light changed. Not all of it. Not the lot. Just the strip of light under the door of Unit 114. The inch of gap where a roll-up door does not quite meet the concrete. For most of the row, that gap was black. Under 114, it had been black too. And then, while I watched, while my foot was on the brake and Delphine was mid-sentence about the county plans, the gap under Unit 114 went pale. Lit. The specific cold pale of a fluorescent tube coming on in a room. The exact light of the QA pit. The exact light of every drop-ceiling room I had ever sat under, spilling out under a door that had no lock, in a unit that was not on any map, in a town a thing from the end of the week had told me to stay out of. Someone had turned on the light. Delphine stopped talking. The baseball played. McGuire fouled one back. And under the door of Unit 114, a shadow crossed the light, once, the way a shadow crosses when someone walks past a doorway inside a room, unhurried, going about the business of a room, and was gone. "Mariani," Delphine said, very quietly. "Not still anymore. The stillness all the way gone now. Back up the car." I put it in reverse. My hand was steady. I noticed it the way I had noticed her hand was steady at the Denny's, and I understood, finally and completely, why that had been the worst part. A steady hand on a thing this wrong is not calm. It is the animal in you refusing to admit, yet, how much trouble it is in. I backed the Tercel onto the frontage road. The light under the door stayed on. No one came out. Nothing followed us. We drove back down Rosehell with the baseball still on the radio. 2 people who had been right about the wrong thing. I did not write in the notebook that night. There are things you do not make more real by putting them in capitals. I lay on top of my blankets in the olive jacket, with the building humming its almost F-sharp, and I finally understood what I had gotten wrong. It was not waiting for me at the end of the week. It was already here.
In a room that is not on any map, in a town I had been warned to stay out of, someone was working late, in no hurry at all, and they had left the door unlocked. Either they did not need a lock, or they were not worried about anyone coming in. I could not decide which was worse. I still cannot. I wrote the number down before my mother said it. Friday morning, at my kitchen table, I was making a list of every true thing I knew about her, a known good copy to keep in case anything changed. And I wrote the number of her classroom door, and it came out wrong. I crossed it out. When I called her later, she told me she had stood in the hallway of a building she had worked in for 22 years, and for half a second could not find her own room. That the number on the door had looked wrong to her. I test other people's software for a living. I notice small wrongnesses. And sitting there with a crossed-out number in my own hand, written before she ever saw it, I started to wonder if I had begun noticing the wrongnesses that had not happened yet, and whether the next one was going to be my mother. Delphine called at 7:15 Friday morning to tell me we were not going back to the storage unit, which was good, because I had spent the part of the night I was not sleeping deciding I was going to go back to the storage unit. I should say who Delphine is, for anyone keeping a log of their own. Delphine Vargas. She took the Tier 2 escalation calls no one else at the AOL Center would touch. She had a manila folder with 63 tickets in it that should not exist, and I had not stopped calling her Vargas since 1993, which was the year I met her, and also, give or take, the year I should have done a number of things differently. She's the only other person on Earth who knew any of this was happening. That morning, she was also the only person making sense. "We're not going back," she said. "Not today. Maybe not for a while. Here's my reasoning, and then you can tell me why I'm wrong." She does this. She lays out the logic first, so that arguing with her feels like arguing with a flowchart. 1. The light was on. Someone, or something, is using that unit, which means going in is no longer breaking into an empty box. It's walking in on a person. 2. We have no idea what walking in on that person does. 3. A pause. 3 is the one that matters. You have somewhere to be on Sunday, and I think Sunday is more important than the unit. And I think you know that. And I think it's why you didn't sleep. I was standing at the kitchen counter. The notebook was where I had left it Wednesday night. Open, sky wrong, and Mom found the photograph. In my own all caps. And I had not added the storage unit to it, because adding it would have made it a fact, and I had wanted one more night of it being a thing I saw, and not a thing I logged. "You think something's going to happen to my mother," I said. "I think the photograph keeps changing," Delphine said. "I think you told me it grew a spaceship between Wednesday and last night. I think things that change in this folder are things someone is working on. And I think the last thing you want is to be standing in a storage unit in Schaumburg while someone finishes working on your mother." I did not say anything. "Call her," Delphine said. "Not to warn her. You can't warn her. There's no sentence. Just call her. Be a son. I'll keep the folder. The unit will still be there." And she hung up. Because Delphine ends calls the way other people end thoughts, when they are done. Here is the problem with warning someone about something you cannot describe. I sat at the kitchen table for a while and tried to draft it, the way I had drafted the reply to the architect in my head, in numbered points. Mom, there is a thing. Mom, your memory of my 5th birthday might change, and if it does, I need you to write down the old version first. Mom, if you ever stand at your own front door and do not know who I am, that is not you. That is them. And I need you to fight it. Every version was insane. Not metaphorically, clinically. Every version was a sentence that, if my mother had heard it from one of her 4th graders, would have prompted a quiet phone call to the boy's parents. I am a person who notices small wrongnesses for a living, and I could not find a single arrangement of words that warned my mother without making me the wrongness in the conversation. I tried framing it as a dream. Humor me. Write down what you remember about my birthday. But my mother has spent 22 years detecting the exact moment a child decides to lie to her, and she would have heard the seam before I finished, and then I would have a worried mother instead of a deleted one, which felt like a downgrade I could not justify causing on a hunch. There was also the uglier problem, which was that I did not entirely believe it myself. A man who notices everything also doubts everything, including the things he notices. Some clerk in the back of my skull was still stamping each of these probably explicable and filing it. Because the alternative was to call my mother and say a sentence that could not be unsaid. So I did the thing you do instead, which is the thing that does not work. I decided to gather evidence. I decided that before I called her, I would establish the baseline. I would write down everything I remembered about my mother, the real version, the known good build, so that if anything changed, I would have the diff. A QA tester, confronted with the thing he loves and cannot protect, will, given the chance, reach for a regression test. I opened the notebook to a clean page, and I wrote Karen at the top, underlined. And under it I started a list. Karen Holloway Mariani. Known good. 4th grade. North side. Room 114. No, room 11. A silver Buick that smells like the peppermints in the console. Calls me Wesley. Always. Never Wes. Watches ER on Thursdays. Cries at it. Denies crying. Pot roast on alternating Sundays. And this is a pot roast Sunday. She reads me like a book she has read before. I stopped at room 114. Because I had written 114. And I'd crossed it out. And the honest thing to say is that I knew exactly where 114 had come from. I had spent the previous night staring in a door with that number on it. It was the most available number in my head. A man writes down the thing he cannot stop thinking about. And I could not stop thinking about that door, so my hand put it where my mother's room number was supposed to go. That is the boring explanation, and it is a good one. And I believed it for about 4 seconds. My mother's classroom is room 11. It has been room 11 since I was old enough to visit it on a day off school and sit at the small desks and feel enormous. Room 11. I had written 114 in a list of true things about my mother, and the boring explanation covered why the number was in my head, but it did not cover why my hand had reached for it here, on this line, in the one place in the notebook where my mother and a wrong number could end up sitting on top of each other.
I crossed it out, and I did not feel better. I looked at the cross out for a long time. Then I did something I had not planned to do, which was try to remember the party myself. Not the photograph. The party. If my mother was the one being edited, and the photograph was the lever, then somewhere in my own head there should still be a clean copy, the real 5th birthday, the one without the spaceship, and I was the QA tester. I was supposed to be the one with the uncorrupted build. I closed my eyes and I reached for it. There was the sheet cake, white, a number 5 candle, my name spelled Wesley in blue gel. I had that. I was sure of that. And then I reached past it for the rest of the day. The room, who was there, what I wore. And the rest of the day was not there. It wasn't blank, which would have been honest. It was smooth. Wiped down. A counter after someone is cleaned up. I did not actually remember my 5th birthday at all. I remembered one detail, the misspelled name, and had been carrying that single frame around my whole life, calling it a memory. It would have been the easiest thing in the world for someone to slide a spaceship into the empty space around it, because the empty space was already there. Memory is mostly empty space, with a few load-bearing details holding up a roof of confidence. I am the backup copy, I thought. And the backup is one frame and a feeling. That was the moment I stopped doubting and got scared. If you want the timestamp. Not the light under the door. This. A man sitting at his own kitchen table, discovering that the version of the past he was supposed to protect was on inspection, almost entirely missing, and that the thing in Schaumburg did not need to fight me for the territory because I had never really held it. Then I closed the notebook because the regression test was the kind of idea that feels like control and is actually the opposite. And I picked up the phone and I called my mother like a person. She picked up on the second ring, the way she always does, because she keeps the cordless on the arm of the chair where she watches her shows. Wesley. Not a question. She always knows. You never call on a Friday morning. Friday morning you're at the salt mine telling them their game is broken. Took a personal day, I said. Which was true, in the sense that I had not gone in, and false in every sense that mattered. Good. You sound like you needed one. You sound thin. She said it the way she has always said it. You sound thin. And I want to be clear that this time it was her. It was my mother, on a cordless phone in her own apartment, saying the things she has said to me my entire life, and it did not come out of a car radio. And I had to actively reassure myself of that. Are you eating? Don't answer. I can hear that you're not. Sunday. Pot roast. I'm doing the carrots the way you like. The burned ones. I'll be there. You'd better. I have the photograph. I told you about the photograph. A small, pleased sound. Your 5th birthday? You and the cake? I keep looking at it. I'd forgotten that whole party. Can you believe it? A thing I was at. And there it was, in the shoebox, under the bed, and now I can't stop looking at it because it's coming back. The more I look, the more I remember. I remember the spaceship on the cake now, and the little candles shaped like planets. I don't know how I ever forgot a cake like that. I sat very still. There had been no spaceship, and there had been no planets. There had been a sheet cake from the Jewel with my name spelled wrong. I knew that the way I knew my own phone number.
But I also did not say the thing I wanted to say, which was, Mom, stop looking at the photograph. Because I had no reason to give her that a sane person would accept. And because some animal part of me understood that the photograph was not the danger. The looking was. The looking was how it got in. And I could not tell her to stop looking at a picture of her own son without becoming the kind of son she would worry about. The candles, shaped like planets, were the part that stayed with me. On Wednesday, it had been a UFO cake she had just found. By last night, in the car, it was a cake with a spaceship on it. Now there were planets. The edit was adding detail in passes, the way you light a model in stages. In each pass, she remembered it harder. "I'm glad you found it, Mom," I said. "You'll see it Sunday. You'll see how happy you were." A pause, and her voice changed, went a half step toward the voice she uses for the thing she actually called to say. Except I had called her, so it was the voice she uses for the thing she had been carrying. "Wesley, I had the strangest thing happen. You'll laugh." "Tell me." "I went to the school yesterday to drop off the field trip forms, and I went to my room, and I stood in the hall outside it for a second because..." She laughed, a real one, embarrassed, because for just a second, I couldn't remember which one was mine. 22 years in that building, and I stood in the hall like a substitute. It came right back. Room 11, of course, end of the hall by the window. But for a second, Wesley, the number on the door looked wrong to me. Isn't that the silliest thing? The peppermints in the Buick console. The burnt carrots. Room 11. End of the hall by the window. "What did the door say?" I asked. And I kept my voice exactly level. The level I use when a bug is reproducing, and I do not want to spook it by being excited. When it looked wrong. What number did it look like? "Oh, I don't know. A bigger number. Sillier. It doesn't matter. It was a half a second." I could hear her waving it off, the actual physical gesture, traveling down the line. "I'm getting old, that's all. You'll find out. Eat something before Sunday so I don't have to look at you being thin across my own table. I love you. Go enjoy your personal day." "I love you too, Mom. Room 11, she said, to herself, pleased to have it back. And she hung up. I put the phone down on the table next to the notebook. Then I opened the notebook to the Karen page, to the line where I had crossed out 114 and written 11, and I sat with what I had and what I did not have. I did not have a confession from my mother that her door had said 114. She had not given me a number. She had given me a bigger number, sillier, a half a second, and waved it off. I was the one supplying the 114. I knew that. I am a person who finds the pattern he is looking for. That is the entire job. And a person like that has to be careful, because the pattern he is looking for and the pattern that is there are not always the same pattern. But I had written it down before she called. That part was not inference. The number was on the page in my own crossed-out hand before my mother stood in a hallway and could not find her own room. The boring explanation told me why 114 was in my head. It did not tell me why I had spent it on her. The architect reads ahead. We had said it out loud at the Denny's. It stands up at the end of the week and looks back. I had spent all week being the one who looked back at it.
I had not once considered that I might be starting to do the same thing to my mother. Or that I might just be a frightened man finding spaceships in a sheet cake. I could not tell which. And that was the whole problem, because the architect had built me a week in which those two things felt exactly the same from the inside. I called Delphine. "I think I can read ahead too," I said. "A little. Wrong. Badly. By accident. I wrote a number down before my mother said it. The number on her classroom door, the one that looked wrong to her. I wrote it before I called her. She told me after." The line was quiet. Then, what was the number? 114. I heard her not say anything, which from Delphine is a paragraph. "Mariani," she said finally. "First, the obvious thing. Because one of us has to say it and you won't. You sat outside a door with 114 painted on it for half an hour last night. Of course it's the number in your head. You'd write 114 on a grocery list right now. So this proves nothing. And if you brought it to me as a ticket, I'd close it as user error. And so would Brian." A breath. "That's the part I'm supposed to say. And I've said it. And here's the part I actually believe. You wrote it on your mother's line. Not on the cat's line, not on the tercels line, on hers. Before she told you her door went wrong. I can explain the number. I can't explain the aim." Her voice flattened. "It's not just leaking backward into the tickets anymore. I think it's leaking into you a little. Badly. The way a bad photocopy picks up a shadow from the page underneath. You're a noticer. That's why it mailed you in the first place. And I think you're starting to notice the things it hasn't done yet. And I think the thing it hasn't done yet is your mother. That's not the part that scares me. I know it's not. Say the part that scares you." "The part that scares me is that the edit it's working on is my mother. The photograph, the classroom, those are warm-ups. It's getting her ready, and I can feel it coming. The way you feel a patch in QA before it deploys. You see the version number tick, and you know the build is staged, and there's nothing to do but wait for the window." I looked at the notebook. At known good, underlined at the top of the list to my mother. Sunday's the window. I don't know how I know. I know. Delphine did not tell me I was wrong. That is the thing about Delphine. The thing that made her the only person I could call. She does not comfort you by telling you the wrong thing is not happening. She thinks about it, and then she tells you what to do. "Then you go to Sunday dinner," she said. "You eat the burned carrots, you look at the photograph, and you remember every single real thing about her, as hard as you can. Because you're the backup now, Mariani. You're the known good copy. Whatever it does to her, you're the one who'll still have the version with no spaceship in it." She paused. "And you take the notebook. Write down what's true while it's still true. I'll have my pager on. If anything happens, you page me, and I will be in that Civic before you finish dialing." I said okay. "And Mariani." Her voice did the thing it had done at the Denny's. The flat, even thing that is how she sounds when she's afraid and refuses to perform it. Whatever looks wrong on Sunday, however she looks at you, it's not her. Remember that it's not her. It's them finishing the build, and your mother is somewhere underneath it, being overwritten.
And the worst thing you could do is treat the new version like it's the real one, just because it's the one standing in front of you.
I wrote that down too, after we hung up. I wrote it in all caps on the Karen page, under the burnt carrots and the peppermints in room 11. If she looks at me wrong on Sunday, it is not her. It is the build. Do not accept the new version. She is under it somewhere. Then I sat at the table with the phone and the notebook and a list of true things about my mother. And I waited for Sunday, the way you wait at a west-facing window for a sky you already know is going to go wrong. Except this time, the window was 2 days long, and the wrongness had my mother's face, and was even now somewhere in a unit that is not on any map, being carefully and lovingly rendered. 2 days. I want to tell you I spent them well, that I called her every hour and anchored her with my voice. I did not. I called once, Saturday, under a thin excuse about the pot roast, and she was fine, completely my mother, telling me the carrots were already on the counter and I should stop checking up on her like one of her own students. I listened to her be entirely herself and could not hear a single wrong note. And that was worse than a wrong note, because it meant the build was staged and quiet, and I was the only one who could feel the version numbers sitting there, waiting for its window. There is no one you can tell that the person you love is fine in a way that frightens you. I did not sleep again that night. I am, by trade and temperament, a person who watches for the thing to deploy. I watched.